Chapter 2367. Everyone, be more attentive. Stop laughing and joking. Be serious, be more serious. The leading official roared with a stern expression. At the same time, he wiped his sweat. He was still scared. If something went wrong here and he was ignored by everyone's laughter, then, the hundreds of people in the room would be beheaded together with their clansmen. When the official who discovered the problem sat down, he realized that he was sweating so much that even his underwear was soaked. He sat down and his crotch was cold. That was close. Motherfucker, everyone sweats when they are nervous. Why am I sweating in my crotch when I'm nervous? It's a head, but a small one. The official muttered in his heart. Kai Nyonyo. Mo Tianji looked at this person's name, waved his hand and said, confirm his personal information again. If the basic information is true, organize all of this person's information and bring it back. Originally, with the efficiency of the intelligence system that Mo Tianji was in charge of, there would definitely not be an incident of confirming someone's information again. However, this time, it was very important. This was a super old man who was over 1,000,000 years old. Just because of his age, there was value in confirming and gathering all of his information again. Business was business, personal was personal. Even though Chu Li'er had a lot of opinions about someone, she would definitely not argue with Mo Tianji on this kind of official matter. She floated out like a gust of wind and quickly came to a hall on the other side. This hall was much bigger than the room that Mo Tianji was in. It was almost 10 times bigger. It was filled with the records of the martial arts experts that Mo Yuntian had recorded over the years. Kai Nyonyo. 1. 17 million years old. Check. There were 100 intelligence personnel here. Each of them was in charge of the records of the martial arts experts over a period of time. As long as they had specific information about a certain person, the speed of checking was very fast. For example, this Kai Nyonyo. His age was a very obvious indicator. Therefore, in just a short while, this Kai Nyonyo's information was found. Kai Nyonyo, male, origin unknown. His identity card shows that he was originally registered in the extreme heavens. This person was cruel and murderous when he was young. He killed the innocent and liked to rape women. When he first showed his talent, he already had the cultivation of heaven realm. He came to Mo Yuntian to join the army. Later, he was promoted to the position of captain. He fought in Mo Yuntian's army for 30 years and made great contributions. However, when he was promoted to general, he quietly left. After that, he went on a rampage in the martial arts world. He specialized in robbing and plundering. Over the years, countless people have been harmed by him. This man has a perverted addiction to treasures. Whenever he sees something, he will definitely try to get his hands on it. I don't know how many murders have been caused because of this. Just with a single thought, the number of innocent people who have died tragically in his hands has reached as high as 3,000 people. He once used the alias of Kai Chenshan and entered Clear Wind sect in the extreme heavens. 10 years later, more than 7,000 people in Clear Wind sect were all killed. The spiritual treasure left behind by the seniors of Clear Wind sect, Fiery Tree Silverflower, which has a great effect on one's foundation, was lost. He once used the alias of Kai Manman and snuck into Eastern Royal Heaven's Lotus Mountain. A few years later, Lotus Mountain would be uprooted by him. Not even a chicken or a dog would be spared. In total, more than 20 big sects were destroyed because of him. All the wealth and heavenly treasures belonged to him alone. The government had issued orders to arrest him many times, but it was to no avail. They lost many soldiers and generals. Later on, Kai Nyonyo slowly became more restrained. Yuan Tianji gave the order to cancel the order to kill him. Until 100,000 years ago, Kai Nyonyo disappeared from the pugilistic world and never appeared again. All weapons, soft sword. According to legend, this sword was forged from the tendons of a golden dragon and the essence of purple cloud iron. It has a unique texture and can be long or short. It can be soft or hard. With this sword in hand, all the weapons in the world are like in a bag. Cultivation, unknown. Suspected to be the heavenly lightning technique, but there is no evidence. Personality, eccentric and violent. If he doesn't agree with someone, He may slaughter the entire city. Extremely brutal. He was once named as the fiercest person in dark cloud heavens. Appearance: his face is haggard. He is thin and withered. His hair is white, like an old man in his twilight years. Mo Tianji took this information and looked through it several times. Other than the original identification that he came from the extreme heavens, he didn't find anything special. According to this information, there was a 50% chance that this person came from some mysterious place. In other words, this Kainonyo was also very likely to be a true spirit. And a true spirit at the high level of a saint. Mo Tianji sighed in his heart. There was an inexplicable shock in his heart. How many more trump cards does this saint monarch have? A true spirit of this level, isn't it too extravagant? Every time he took out a trump card, it was so shocking. It was simply shocking. Although he was shocked, Mo Tianji was still certain of one thing. This was definitely not the most powerful trump card of the saint monarch. He must have other hidden powers. Perhaps they were even more terrifying than what he had shown now. This was for sure. Since the enemy had made his move again, Mo Tianji couldn't not accept the challenge. However, this time, he was facing a high-level saint. Who should he send? What kind of strategy did they have in mind? Did they still insist on capturing him alive? Wouldn't that be a little suicidal? Mo Tianji frowned. He sealed this information and handed it to Chu Le. Bring this information to boss and let him make a decision on this matter. And that supreme black fog. Let him make a decision too. When it came to the analysis of the enemy's combat strength, Mo Tianji admitted that he wasn't as good as Chu Yang. Therefore, he directly handed this hot potato over. Being able to hand this decision over to someone else, Mo Tianji faintly had a strange feeling of relief. Why is that so? Chu Le was a little puzzled. Wasn't Mo Tianji the one making all the decisions previously? Why is it different this time? I never belittle myself, but I also don't think too highly of myself. When it comes to analyzing the enemy's strength and formulating strategies to deal with the enemy, I'm not as good as Chu Yang. Mo Tianji said frankly. Besides, I'm too hard-hearted. I only look at the results and don't care about the process. This will invisibly cause more sacrifices in the process. Perhaps these sacrifices aren't necessary. Chu Yang is different. Although Chu Yang also values the results, he cares more about the sacrifices in the process. He will try his best to reduce the price he has to pay in this process. As long as he can reduce the price of his life, he would rather choose to take a roundabout route rather than use the most direct and cold-blooded method to achieve victory. Mo Tianji said, and in the current situation, no matter which one of our brothers is lost, or if there's any irrecoverable injuries, we can't afford to lose them. Therefore, this matter is handed over to Big Brother Chu to ensure that nothing goes wrong. Besides, the cultivation of these two people is too high. I'm afraid that something will go wrong if I make the decision. Chu Le said, I see. My big brother is still the wiser one. Then, she drifted out like a gust of wind. Although Le was still flattering Chu Yang, she had a new understanding of Mo Tianji in her heart. Mo Tianji is still very self-aware. Mo Tianji's trust in Chu Yang had obviously reached a point where it couldn't be any higher. Mo Tianji didn't think that he was omnipotent. He was very clear-headed and knew his own strengths and weaknesses. For some reason, Chu Le actually felt sincerely happy that she had such thoughts in her heart. Therefore, when she went to look for Chu Yang this time, it was completely with a kind of joy and a kind of faint gratification. I say, little girl, what's wrong with you? Chu Yang's brows were almost knitted together as he looked at his younger sister. Could it be that this girl had a fever? Using that kind of attitude that could almost be described as jumping for joy to give him such a huge and stressful piece of bad news that could crush him to death. Is this news worthy of you being so happy? Big brother, what are you talking about? I didn't do anything. Chu Le put her hands behind her back and jumped up and down happily in a posture unique to little girls. She didn't care about Chu Yang's surprise at all. Originally, with Le's age, Chu Yang should feel happy and gratified that she could do such a thing. A little girl shouldn't have to bear so much in the first place. But at this moment, Chu Yang was very depressed and very puzzled. Why are you so happy? Chu Yang's brows furrowed even deeper. Did something good happen? Why don't you share it with me? Chu Lu'er blushed and looked even more beautiful. She snorted and said, I'm not telling you. Then she turned around and jumped out. Okay, I'm going back now. With a whoosh, she disappeared. This little girl. Why is she so jumpy? She's just like a little crazy. Chu Yang smiled dotingly. Then he looked at the name and information of Kai Nyonyo and couldn't help but ponder. To deal with such a person, Luo Kedi and Ji Mo were obviously not suitable. This person was a perverted murderer. To deal with such a person, the only right way was to kill him as soon as possible in the most direct way. To carry out such a mission, there were two people who were most suitable, Dong Wushang and Jiyu Duxing. Of course, there was also Mo Lei. Mo Lei always stayed close to Dong Wushang. She definitely wouldn't allow Shu Ailang to fall into a dangerous situation alone. If there was really an irresistible danger, she would jump out at any time and participate in solving the problem. In that case, to deal with this Kai Nyonyo with three great experts, he believed that even if the other party was a high-level saint, facing these three people at the same time, it wouldn't bode well for him. Chu Yang pondered for a moment and finally added another person to the list of people to deal with Kai Nyonyo. Wang Dao. This knife was getting sharper and sharper now. To let him participate in a battle to snipe high-level saints was undoubtedly a great boost for him. In particular, to experience Mo Lei's elusive assassination techniques in close proximity, he believed that he would be able to learn a lot more from it. Chapter 2368. Many people are really asking for a scolding. They won't wake up if they don't scold them. A bunch of idiots take pride in being scolded. They won't feel comfortable if they don't get scolded. This fucking world is so big, nothing is too strange. What a fucking bitch. Before scolding, let's talk about something else. I have been writing for more than 4 years, and every year, there are many things to deal with. Let me make one thing clear, our Shandong Laiwu is a small city. The entire city, including the villages, has a total of 1 million people. The last time Gen came here, he specially found a taxi and drove around the entire city, spending 35 yuan. Yes, it's such a big city, a prefecture-level city. My home is here. All my relatives, friends, and classmates are here. The furthest relative's house is less than 20 kilometers away from my home. As long as there is something, there will be a notice. I can't not go. Throughout the year, other than catching a cold and having a fever, there are more than 20 birthdays to celebrate. My parents, my biological uncle and auntie, my wife and I, my father-in-law and mother-in-law, my 3 aunts, a few uncles' birthdays. Wait, there are also some friends' birthdays that I have to go. Counting in this way, it's not a small number. Laiwu's custom is to visit relatives during the spring festival. Every year, during the Dragon Boat Festival and the Autumn Festival, we also have to visit relatives and visit them. This also requires time. A meticulous reader once calculated, Fengling, your father's birthday is on the lunar calendar, and your father-in-law's birthday is on the same day. He said it clearly one by one. I was surprised and asked him how he knew. This guy said that for the past 4 years, every time you meet these few days, you have to explain it in the book. It's easy to calculate. If you want to lie, you can't find the same day every year and use the same reason to lie. No one has such a good memory. I repeat, I live in my hometown, not Beijing or Shanghai where I can't reach. The main point is, when I encounter this kind of situation, I usually update late or early. I never ask for leave or stop updating. Even if I ask for leave, I'll make up for it by double. Many people who leave the village and enter the big city can't rush back because of something at home. Everyone can understand this phenomenon, but it doesn't mean that there's nothing at home. Besides, even if there's something that needs to rush back, your parents have dealt with it when you were young, so there's no need for you. You may not know what your parents have sacrificed, but ignorance is not a reason for you to scold others. Why are there so many idiots now? They're looking for excuses to scold me while watching pirated versions. It's my birthday today. Tomorrow I'll visit my relatives tomorrow. The day after tomorrow I'll catch a cold. The day after tomorrow someone will die. Why are you so troublesome, Fengling? Worst of all, he even scolded his family. Damn you, did I give you any face? Fuck. Looking for an excuse? Was I coaxing you for fun? Do I need to find a reason? What's more, it's not like I'm not going to update. Why would I need to find an excuse? Your parents coaxed you because you are their son. But you're not my son. Why should I coax you? Even if you are my son, I will still beat and scold you. Coax you every day? Who the fuck do you think you are? Fuck. Are you RMB? What a brainless thing. Did he really think he was some big shot? Looking at pirated versions every day and scolding the author, what kind of glory was that? Even the tens of thousands of readers who paid money to read the book didn't have any objections. What right did you have to scold me after seeing that it was a pirated copy? You keep saying that authors are your employees and readers are your bosses, but are there any bosses in the world who only let their employees work without paying them a salary? Boss. Hee. It's not that I am looking down on you, but you don't even want to spend a few cents and still want to scold me every day. Don't even think of being a boss in your lifetime. You don't have that kind of life. You keep saying that China is a pirated country, and even computers are pirated. But when the pirated computer software is broken and can't be used, did you scold Bill Gates? Scold Microsoft? Why are you scolding the author when you look at pirated versions? Furthermore, are you proud of China being a pirated country? Scolding the author when you look at pirated versions? I don't understand your mentality, it's unbelievable. A bunch of stupid B** keys. I did not purposely ask you to look at the original version, but what's with scolding me? What a bunch of stupid B** keys. It's all because I've spoiled you. A bunch of people with no fan points actually want to take the book down and say that they will never vote for you again. But the problem is, have you ever fought before? Have you ever voted before? You keep shouting like you are a saint, but you don't know how stupid you are in the eyes of others. Today, I will give you a chance to scold you. Those stupid B** keys who look at pirated versions and scold me, you can feel proud now. Because you have angered me, you all have a great sense of achievement. Wow, you all are so happy to be scolded. Chapter 2369. Chu Yang thought to himself, given Mai and Qingwu's strength, it should be more than enough to defeat a high-level saint like Black Fog True Monarch. As long as this supreme Black Fog is not a peak saint, Mo Qingwu, and I can take him down completely. Moreover, this will be the first time I face a powerful enemy since I reunited with Mo Qingwu. Victory. Invincible. Chu Yang must build this confidence. Not only for himself, but more importantly for Mo Qingwu. May you dance with me all the way to the top. After Chu Yang made up his mind, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief and immediately issued an order. Kill 2 high-level saints. Jiyu Duxing and Dong Wushang immediately moved out. 2 figures, one was extremely sharp, like a sharp sword that cut through the blue sky, the other was burly and majestic, like the earth moving together. Dong Wushang and Jiyu Duxing both had a kind of excitement in their hearts. Boss said, kill. Then, this time, we must kill. I can't afford to lose Tribulation's face. Boss's first order to kill after reuniting, I can't let him down. Looking at Dong Wushang and Jiyu Duxing leaving confidently, Chu Yang's eyes shone brightly. At the same time, he felt an inexplicable emotion in his heart. Once upon a time, when facing a supreme martial artist of the heavenly continent, he had to flee for his life and was always in danger. Even running for his life was like treading on thin ice. But now, when facing a saint-level master of the heavenly imperial court, he could decide his life and death with just a word. I've grown up after all. Chu Yang raised his sword-like eyebrows and looked at the endless night outside the window. He didn't know whether it was out of pride or out of emotion, but he sighed. Black Mist Sage was sitting in the inn, with 2 expressionless guards standing behind him. In front of him, there were 2 slender young ladies who were diligently massaging his thighs. Just like that, he stretched his body and tilted his head. From time to time, he would let out 2 groans, indicating that they needed to use more strength on the places they were massaging. Suddenly, a groan of extreme comfort came from his throat. At that moment, it was clear that the comfort had reached its peak. He suddenly straightened up and laughed heartily. He grabbed the hair of a young girl and pressed her down. He stretched his neck and suddenly bit the young girl's neck with a catcher sound. Blood gushed out. The girl's pretty face immediately turned pale and she screamed in horror. The other girl also seemed to be stunned by this sudden attack and didn't know what to do for a moment. Just like that, he stood there motionlessly, as if he was a wooden sculpture. Ha ha ha. Sure enough, fresh human blood, especially the blood of a virgin, is the most delicious. Supreme Black Fog laughed loudly. I didn't expect that there's a virgin in this materialistic ink cloud city. You're really a bargain. Before the laughter ended, a cold voice suddenly rang out. Even if there's only one good woman left in the world that you've met, she might not necessarily let you off so easily. The cold voice said, because you don't deserve it. Supreme Black Fog was shocked when he heard this, because with this cold snort, two ghastly killing intents had completely locked onto him. For a moment, the peerless devil monarch, who used to dominate the whole ink cloud sky, felt a chill down his spine and didn't dare to move a little. His sharp teeth had already bitten the girl's neck. He only needed to suck a little harder, and this girl's virgin yin and life essence would be sucked into his mouth and he would feast on them. But under the threat of such a ghastly killing intent, he didn't dare to move. Another clear voice said coldly, "Let go of that girl immediately, and I'll give you a chance to have a fair fight. If you don't, you'll die together with me." Under the cover of such a ghastly killing intent, the two bodyguards of Supreme Black Fog had already taken action. They were completely covered by the mysterious person's divine awareness. Their faces were pale, and they didn't even dare to move a finger. Only the cold sweat on their foreheads dripped to the ground, making a pa-pa sound. These two bodyguards were also at the peak of the celestial being level, and they were definitely not mediocre. But under the threat of the hidden enemy, they were so weak. The person who intimidated them and didn't hide his killing intent must be two sage masters. And they were definitely above the celestial being level, the standard of a senior level. In an instant, Black Fog Sage had already made such a conjecture. He laughed and said, "Is that true?" As long as the enemy kept his promise and gave him a fair chance to fight, the prey in his hands would be nothing. However, the Black Mist Supreme who had gotten a chance to catch his breath would not fight on the spot. He would only run away immediately, regardless of everything. He would never stay here to have a fair fight with the enemy. What a joke! In the face of such a guy, even one of them was terrible enough, let alone two at the same time. Fair! How could there be fairness? When the two of them appeared here at the same time, it was destined that there would be no fairness. As for the mission, although the mission was important, he had to save his life first. Only by saving his life could he talk about the future. Without his life, what else could he do? The woman's cold voice sounded again, "It's up to you to believe it or not. But I can guarantee that if you touch a hair of the girl in front of you again, you will definitely die." This statement made Supreme Black Fog feel relieved. Obviously, the other party cared about the innocent. Heh, this is really a stupid idea. Supreme Black Fog laughed and said, "She's just a country girl. Why would I care about her? But now that she's involved with me, it's fate." As he said that, he slowly pushed the girl's body out of the way with one hand, but the other hand was still waiting, in case something unexpected happened. I didn't expect that there were two heroes hiding in the dark, and they seemed to be a male and female hero. Ha ha. Supreme Black Fog laughed wildly in his heart. Hero? In Jianghu, the title of hero had changed from the most primitive respect to complete sarcasm. The title of Daishia in itself represented a lot of scruples, a sanctimonious appearance, and a sloppiness. To be honest, the strongest enemy that the Avilders of Jianghu were most willing to meet was a Daishia, because heroes were reasonable. Being reasonable was the most precious quality of human beings, but now it had evolved into the most effective weapon for criminals to deal with the righteous Lord. Even if they couldn't beat him, they just had to kneel down and beg for mercy. Hero, I was helpless at the moment. If there was a way out, How could I do such an outrageous thing? After a tearful complaint, the hero would often sigh and be lenient. You can go now. You must repent and change your ways in the future. Then they would agree and leave with tears of gratitude. Just by saying a few good words to save his life, the queen would continue to do evil, rape him, and kill him. If there was a chance that this hero would fall into her hands, of course, she would not repay the kindness of sparing her life. On the contrary, she would intensify the torture and torture this hero to death. An idiot like you naturally deserves to die. Who asked you to spare my life in the past? Because of your kindness, how many families have been destroyed? What's the point of such a fool like you living? Even a criminal like me knows the principle of eliminating all evil. But you're so stupid as to let the bad guys live. Shouldn't such a brainless person die? Therefore, when the Black Fog Lord heard that the two people outside cared so much about the life of the girl, he suddenly had a plan in his mind. Do you want to be chivalrous? I'll let you do it to your heart's content. The Black Fog Lord couldn't stop thinking, but his face was frank and calm. I've let go of the girl now. You two can come in. I hope you two can keep your promise and have a fair fight to the death. Abide by the rules of Jianghu and the righteousness of heaven. To be honest, when the Black Fog Lord talked about the rules of Jianghu and the righteousness of heaven, he finally couldn't help but vomit. Damn it, in this world, who still followed the bullshit rules of Jianghu? Wouldn't that be stupid? Outside, a clear male voice said, of course, we're chivalrous, so we have to follow the rules. There are things to do, and there are things not to do. Do you think that the world is filled with demons like you? Hearing this, the Black Fog Lord was even more relieved. Even the way this guy talked was rigid. It seemed that he was really a hero. Therefore, he was relieved and pushed the young girl out. He laughed and said, if that's the case, I would like to ask the two heroes to show yourself. Let me see the true faces of the chivalrous men and women of this era. It's the greatest honor of my life to have a fair fight with you two heroes. The male voice didn't relax at all, and said, let the two girls out. Don't let them get involved. Get out, get out. The Black Fog Lord sneered in his mind, you care so much about two ordinary girls. Even if you're a bullshit hero, you're too soft-hearted. Facing people like you, even if I can't defeat you, can't I escape? What's more, I have countless tricks up my sleeves that can make you trust me 100%. The two girls struggled and stumbled out, as if they had been pardoned. They were still choking with sobs, and tears were falling down like rain. Who would have thought that waiters in a hotel because of their poverty would be treated so badly? They've both left. You can come out now. The Black Fog Lord had taken advantage of the opportunity when the enemy's divine sense was focused on the two girls, and raised all his cultivation. At this moment, he was full of confidence. As long as he seized the opportunity and put both sides in a fair and open environment, the Black Fog Lord didn't think that he would be afraid of anyone. Although the two people on the other side were both expert, their strength wasn't enough to pose a threat to him. Chapter 2370. At this moment, the fighting spirit of immortal Black Fog rose up in his heart. Childish heroes, let me teach you a lesson in life. This first lesson in life may be your last lesson. He really didn't expect to meet such two rookies in Jianghu now. The crisp female voice said, are you Immortal Black Fog? Immortal Black Fog raised his head, laughed and said, yes, it's me. Judging from your voices, you must be young, but you have such cultivation. You really shame me. Seeing your cultivation, I really feel that I have lived in vain. The female voice seemed to be a little hesitant. She said, really? Are you sure? Immortal Black Fog was depressed. How did I meet such two rookies? I was polite to you because I wanted to lure you into the trap. Why are you questioning my identity so stubbornly? Is there anyone who dares to pretend to be Immortal Black Fog in Dark Cloud Sky? He had no choice but to answer patiently, I am famous in the world. Who dares to pretend to be me? The female voice said, so, you are the real Immortal Black Fog? Immortal Black Fog almost had a headache because of these questions. He reluctantly said, what else do you want to ask? Why don't you show up? Don't you want a fair fight? The female voice laughed and said, I have shown up. Perfected monarch Blackfog was taken aback when he heard that. Then, he heard two soft sounds and a sharp gust of wind was about to reach him. The cicada notices before the golden wind moves, and you secretly send yourself to death without knowing it. Immortal Blackfog, who had experienced hundreds of battles, didn't even think or look back. He just rolled on the ground like a lazy donkey and rolled out of the door. Because at this moment, Immortal Blackfog had already heard from his experience of killing millions that the two sounds were the sound of the necks of the two bodyguards being pierced. And that sharp sound of wind breaking was a sword launching a sneak attack on him. When a martial artist reached the level of sage, the speed of his attack was definitely faster than the speed of sound. If he were to turn around to see what was going on, it would be tantamount to sending his throat to the tip of the enemy's sword. Therefore, he didn't turn around. He directly tripped and rolled all the way out. At this moment, preserving his life was more important. Status and identity were just fleeting clouds. At the same time, he cursed, How dare you sneak attack me from behind? Do you still have the demeanor of a Jianghu hero? Hee. There was a sneer behind him, and a cold voice said, Who told you that Laro Da is a hero? Are you brain dead, you bastard? Do you think we're heroes? Along with the voice, another sharp whistle suddenly rang out in the air. It was the sword that had attacked Blackfog Sage just now. Only now did the sound of the sword truly belong to that sword. Perfected monarch Black Mist felt a chill in his heart. This explanation was even more shocking to Black Mist Sage than the sneak attack just now. Just from the way he addressed himself as old, he was definitely not the most orthodox hero of the martial world. From his voice, he sounded more like a hooligan. A hero was not scary, nor was a hooligan, but a hooligan at the level of a senior sage was too scary. However, at this moment, there was a faint murderous intent behind his head, and it was already 3 inches away. Perfected monarch Black Mist didn't dare to stay any longer. He broke through the wall like a rubber ball and rolled all the way out. He still took the time to shout, Sneak attack from behind, aren't you afraid of being ridiculed by the martial world? At this moment, he still had a glimmer of hope in his heart. What if the other party actually wanted to be a hero? But he heard the man behind him scolding, Fuck you. This time, Perfected monarch Black Mist really gave up completely. Damn it, I've never seen a Jianghu hero scolding people like this, it's so vulgar. Perfected monarch Black Mist really thought, even if I'm full of evil, you can't scold me like this. After all, I'm a famous person. But the life-threatening crisis was hanging over his head. It seemed that he didn't even have time to take a breath, let alone protest. He could only roll all the way out, like a rubber ball, for thousands of feet. However, under the threat of the other party's awe-inspiring sword chi, he didn't even have the chance to straighten up and change his moves to resist. He could only roll all the way out. In fact, rolling all the way was a unique skill of Perfected monarch Black Mist. It was called the 18 rolling clouds. It was the most effective way to deal with a sneak attack from the back. Its speed was definitely not slower than that of an ordinary high-level sage. And every time he rolled, there would be a follow-up move. It was really a move hidden within a move, with infinite killing moves hidden within. As long as there was a moment of time, he could turn over at any time and give a fatal blow to the enemy who was chasing after him. In the past, in such a situation, Perfected monarch Black Mist didn't need to use all the 18 rolling clouds at all. He could turn over and stand up to the enemy even if he was at a disadvantage for a while. But now, in the face of a horrible long sword, he didn't even have the chance to straighten up. Even until now, he didn't know what the enemy behind him looked like. Perfected monarch Black Mist was going crazy with regret. If it weren't for his wrong judgment at the beginning, if it weren't for his one-sided thinking that the other party was a hero, if it weren't for, how could he have fallen into such an embarrassing situation now? This bastard behind him didn't even have the slightest demeanor. He directly used underhanded means to kill him. Didn't you just say that you wanted a fair fight? Perfected monarch Black Mist rolled and shouted sullenly. If it weren't for you saying that you would give me a fair chance to fight, I would have escaped at the risk of getting injured. Now, I would be at least hundreds or thousands of miles away. Why didn't you keep your word? Despicable and shameless. Perfected monarch Black Mist felt wronged. He had always been the one who betrayed others and was despicable and shameless. When had he ever been cheated so badly? The cold voice behind him said, I was right to say that you were a moron. You believed me when I said that I would give you a fair chance to fight. Now, if I tell you that I'm actually your father, would you believe me? Perfected monarch Black Mist almost spat out a mouthful of blood. What kind of person was the person behind him? Damn it, isn't this too shameless? Even though we're on opposing sides, your mouth is too venomous. But at this moment, there was no time to be angry. It was more important to escape. No matter how despicable the other party was, who asked him to be so powerful that he thought that the other party was a hero? Damn it, how can there be so many heroes in the world? Perfected monarch Black Mist cried in his heart. I'm really out of my mind. He rolled all along the way as if he was riding on the clouds and mist. All along the way, he'd already destroyed countless houses and residences, yet the lethal sword chi behind him didn't weaken in the slightest, and it was still attached to him from the beginning to the end. And it was getting closer and closer. Perfected monarch Black Mist rolled faster and faster. He had even activated the potential of his life to escape in a way that exceeded his own limits. The sweat on his body had already turned blood red. Sweat and blood. But he didn't know that Chu Yang, who was activating the sword energy behind him, was also extremely surprised. This perfected monarch Black Mist was really extraordinary. He deserved his reputation. From the beginning, Chu Yang had taken advantage of the fact that he was enjoying himself with Mo Qingwu's divine sense and completely locked onto her. Under normal circumstances, no matter how high the opponent's cultivation was, as long as he hadn't broken through a big level of their combined strength, he could be killed with one sword strike. But Chu Yang had tried his best and used all his skills to activate the ultimate 1,000 miles chasing sword. What harm is there in slaughtering the whole world? He had chased the opponent for a distance of 70,000 feet, but he still couldn't kill the opponent with his sword. Chu Yang had obviously gained the upper hand, and even had the absolute killing power. It was as if he could cut off the opponent's head at any time, but he still couldn't complete the last step. What was more frightening was that Chu Yang himself knew that his physical strength was almost reaching its limit. In the face of such a difficult opponent, as long as there was a slight gap, the opponent would have a chance to turn the situation around. But Chu Yang didn't have a suitable strategy to deal with the opponent's endless rolling and dodging. At this moment, as long as the opponent took a breath, it would be Chu Yang's turn to be at a disadvantage. Although Chu Yang had the upper hand now, the situation between the two sides was delicate. Chu Yang could only maintain this chasing situation. He couldn't not. He couldn't not. Even though it was dangerous and the situation was dire, Chu Yang could only continue to kill without hesitation, because Chu Yang still had one last move. Mo Qingwu stepped on the heavenly dance. Her red clothes were as red as blood. She looked like a red cloud that was slowly floating in the air. She looked elegant and carefree. But she had already unleashed all of her potential. She was almost as fast as the wind and lightning. Her eyes were fixed on the shining sword light in front of her. That was Chu Yang's calamity sword. In the face of such a powerful enemy, although Mo Qingwu was a little nervous, she was more excited. Because this was the first time she and Chu Yang had joined forces to fight. This was also the first time since the two of them met again that only the two of them were joining forces to fight against such a powerful enemy. This battle must be won, no matter what. There must not be any mistakes. Mo Qingwu had always thought that as long as she was with Chu Yang, they would be invincible. There must be no mistakes in today's battle. This was the first time she and Chu Yang had joined forces after reuniting. No matter what, she had to take down this evil black fog perfected lord as a sacrifice. Mo Qingwu let out a tender shout. Her body sped up again. Chu Yang had already pushed her from behind. Mo Qingwu rushed out like she was riding on clouds. Qingwu Dream Saber flickered with dreamy colors and slashed down at Black Fog perfected lord like a thunderbolt. Sky dance, heaven and earth dance. Chapter 2371. Bullshit, go to hell. Before true monarch Black Fog could finish his words, Chu Yang's furious calamity sword struck again. With a flash of light like a thunderbolt, true monarch Black Fog's head flew up and then fell down. The headless corpse of true monarch Black Fog, from his neck to his crotch, was neatly divided into two pieces. You deserve to die, you're worse than a beast. Chu Yang was furious. The calamity sword stirred wildly, and true monarch Black Fog, from head to toe, quickly turned into pure energy and was completely devoured by the calamity sword. All that was left was a pile of ashes. Chu Yang rarely did things so ruthlessly, humiliating the enemy's corpse. But this time, true monarch Black Fog's last sentence ignited the boundless anger in Chu Yang's heart. Mo Qingwu was Chu Yang's first reverse scale. This person who was already dead actually dared to speak vulgarly to Mo Qingwu, and look at her with his eyes. Chu Yang might as well destroy his entire spirit. Mo Qingwu stood quietly not far away, her beautiful eyes shining with joy. Seeing Chu Yang so ruthless and angry because of her, Mo Qingwu did not panic. Instead, there was an inexplicable sweetness in her heart. The one he cares about the most is still me. In this world, no one can hurt me in front of Chu Yang. On the other side, Dong Wushang and Jiyu Duxing encountered the first fierce battle in their lives. That senile Kai Nyonyo, who seemed to be on the verge of dying at any moment, burst out with a fighting prowess when he faced the attacks of these two people. And, this fighting prowess even made peerless experts like Jiyu Duxing and Dong Wushang feel boundless shock. The two found Kai Nyonyo at a snack stall in front of the inn. In the downtown area. Jiyu Duxing originally wanted to follow him back and choose a relatively less crowded place to attack, but an accidental discovery made the two immediately change their minds and decide to attack immediately. They saw Kai Nyonyo sitting there with his body bent, blocking half of the door. He seemed to be looking at the crowd coming and going on the street with blurred eyes. He seemed to be doing nothing. However, everyone who passed by him showed a kind of dispirited look. No matter how energetic they were, as long as they passed by that door, they would become dispirited. With Jiyu Duxing's eyesight, he naturally discovered this abnormal situation immediately. Then, he carefully observed it with his divine sense. In the air, there were numerous densely packed threads. Those were invisible threads. However, as long as someone passed by and touched those threads would immediately entangle that person. Then, a part of this person's life force would quietly emanate from their body and be extracted, forming a completely transparent energy that floated in front of Kai Nyonyo. In front of Kai Nyonyo was a bowl of ordinary noodles. As long as his thread wrapped around a person's vitality, he would move his chopsticks, pick up a noodle, and put it into his mouth along with the vitality thread. It was unknown how many threads there were in the sky, but they almost covered the entire street. It was like a huge and dense spider web. After a string sent back life force, it would immediately return and once again stretch across the sky, waiting for another person's life force to arrive. Every time Kai Nyonyo ate the noodles, he actually only ate a small portion. Then, he would put the rest back into the bowl, and when another person's vitality arrived, he would eat another small portion. He was like an old man in his twilight years who was infinitely cherishing the few meals he could still eat in his life. It was as if he would die tomorrow and not be able to eat anymore. That kind of reluctance and cherishing, he did his best to continue this hard-won meal. But now, he had already eaten half of that huge bowl of noodles. This meant that at least thousands of people had unknowingly lost a part of their vitality and been eaten into his stomach. As he ate, he sighed. His dim yellow eyes were filled with the emotion of an old life. There was even a strong sense of pity. This bastard deserves to die 10,000 times. In such a short time, he has unknowingly devoured the vitality of so many innocent people. Letting him live a little longer is unnecessary. Dong Wushang and Jiyu Duxing immediately decided that they couldn't wait any longer. It was really too evil. Just by looking at such an extremely evil cultivation method, the two of them felt their hair stand on end. Unknowingly, the originally good vitality was gone just like that. Dong Wushang strode out from the shadows with the dark saber on his shoulder. He was like a moving mountain, with a dense and vigorous aura and an unparalleled pressure. In just 3 steps, he had already arrived in front of Kai Nyonyo. In the places where he passed, all the threads arranged they were like a camel breaking into a spider's web. Pa, pa, pa. All of them were broken. All of them were rolled back. At the same time, Jiyu Duxing also took a step forward. A piercingly cold and abundant sword aura was emitted from his body. From one end of the street to the other, those extremely evil threads were all destroyed by the sword aura at the same time. Kai Nyonyo raised his dim old eyes and looked at Dong Wushang. He muttered weakly, "This warrior, are you here to eat noodles? This old man is blocking your way. Sorry, sorry." As he said this, he slowly retreated with staggering steps. Just like a timid and kind old man who was retreating to avoid trouble. Dong Wushang glared at him angrily and said, "Kai Nyonyo, is this bowl of noodles of yours delicious?" Kai Nyonyo smiled honestly and licked his lips. He said honestly, "It's delicious. The saltiness is just right. There's also shredded meat inside. It's really delicious. This old man loves the noodles made here the most." As he said this, he let out a long sigh and said, "This old man is already so old. Every day I live is a day less. These noodles, every bowl I eat is also a bowl less. This beautiful world," Dong Wushang said indifferently, "you're already so old. You've already lived what you should have lived and eaten what you should have eaten. I think it's time for you to die." Kai Nyonyo nodded humbly. "Yes, yes. This old man feels a little tired of living. After eating this bowl of noodles today, I don't know if I can eat it again tomorrow." Some of the others who were eating earlier stood up and glared at Dong Wushang. "How can you speak like that? Is there anyone who speaks like that to an old man? You have an extraordinary bearing. How can the 5 of you speak so uncultured?" Immediately, a group of people echoed and criticized Dong Wushang. The eyes of the masses were never clear. They were all people who echoed what others said, and it was even more so in front of them. Dong Wushang looked at these people who criticized him with great pity. "Do you know that this old man whom you're fighting for has already unknowingly stolen a considerable part of your life force? Originally, you should be able to live to 70 or 80 years old. But now, I'm afraid you won't even live to 10 years old. It's all because of this old man in front of you who you're trying your best to protect. This world is still beautiful." Tears streamed down Kai Nyonyo's face, as if he couldn't be more touched by the actions of the people in front of him. He repeatedly cupped his hands to express his gratitude. Jiyu Duxing's figure was as straight as a sword. He walked in with a strong killing intent. His gaze was like a sword as he looked at Kai Nyonyo. "Kai Nyonyo, do you feel that human life is precious in this world? That it's also worth protecting?" Kai Nyonyo nodded repeatedly and sighed sadly. "Yes, yes. It's really not easy to live in this world. Even if it's past dusk and the world is about to part, it's still precious." He stood up shakily and let out a long sigh. "The long sky and thick earth nurtured my parents. There are many hardships in life: wind, knives, and frost, sharpening the years, a forest of knives and rain of swords, to win fame and glory, open spears and hidden arrows, to move forward, pitiful people, many worries, the world is in chaos, where is the paradise?" His tone was really full of compassion for the state of the universe and the fate of mankind. Many people who heard this couldn't help but feel a lot of resonance in their hearts. They actually sighed a little. Jiyu Duxing was completely indifferent to this. He said quietly and indifferently, "Kai Nyonyo, you've really played enough of this show. Do you want to go out with us, or do you want to settle it here?" After seeing this demon unreasonably devouring the life force of so many people, Jiyu Duxing only felt disgust towards Kai Nyonyo's word. Kai Nyonyo said hesitantly, "Settle it." "Settle what?" "Settle it and finish this bowl of noodles." Jiyu Duxing didn't move, but the expression on his face was completely cold. An invisible sword energy and a dense murderous aura surged out. Dong Wushang couldn't hold it in anymore. He strode forward and kicked the big bowl in front of Kai Nyonyo into the air. Then, he reached out to grab Kai Nyonyo. "Old bastard, Do you think I can't see through your disguise? Do you still want to be so pretentious and try to fool me? Instantly, there were criticisms all around. Some people even scolded angrily, how can this man be so inhumane? How can he be so rude to such an old man? Don't you have any old people in your family? Kai Nyonyo shouted, murder! Someone wants to kill me, this old man. Save me. Beside him, two young men in martial attire walked over quickly and shouted, stop. If you continue to be rude to this old man, we won't be polite to you. Dong Wushang flew into a rage in an instant. He turned around and shouted angrily, shut up. His shout was like a sudden clap of thunder in the air. Everyone felt dizzy the moment they heard the roar. At the same time, the dark saber was already unsheathed. Without any explanation, the saber chopped down. Since you still want to pretend, I'll just show your true face. If you still want to play a show to gain sympathy and incite the ignorant masses, then stand straight and let me chop you. I'd like to see if you're the best actor in the Heaven Palace. Such a thunderous saber fell down with a loud bang. Naturally, it caused a series of exclamations. Chapter 2372. There were a few people with a strong sense of justice who wanted to step forward to help. However, they couldn't do so under Dong Wushang's tyrannical aura. It was as if their entire bodies were frozen stiff. They couldn't move even an inch. A bright light flashed in Kai Nyonyo's eyes. He could no longer put on an act in the face of such an indomitable and unreasonable attack. No matter how good his acting skills were, they were useless in the face of such a resolute attack. He stood up abruptly, and stretched out his bony right hand before he slowly raised it. The black saber fell down with the power of wind and thunder. Such divine power should have been unparalleled and unstoppable. However, when it reached the top of Kai Nyonyo's head, it met his palm. The palm and the saber collided with each other. The black saber stopped in the air. With Dong Wushang's strength, he couldn't split the palm in front of him. It was stopped in the air. Kai Nyonyo's dim old eyes shot out a faint cold light, and he said indifferently, young man, don't be so angry. Don't use your saber, spear, and shout to kill. You must know that anger is harmful to the body. When you reach my age, you will know this truth. Of course, the premise is that you can live to my age. Dong Wushang pulled out his saber with a whoosh and slashed down again. He shouted, I want to see how long you can pretend. If you have the guts, continue pretending. This saber slashed out countless saber shadows in the air. It was as if 10,000 sabers were falling down in an instant. Wherever the saber shadows passed, there was white smoke in the air. Under the extreme speed, the air was burning. Dong Wushang only used about 50% of his strength in the previous saber slash, but he could see Kai Nyonyo's terrifying strength. So, he didn't hold back at all in this saber slash. He attacked with all his strength. Jiu Du Xing held the hilt of his sword and watched the battle from the side. However, the huge pressure emitted from him made Kai Nyonyo clearly feel that he couldn't act rashly. He couldn't even deal with Dong Wushang with all his strength. As long as he dared to attack with all his strength, Jiu Du Xing could kill him in an instant. At the same time, Kai Nyonyo also vaguely felt that there was a faint killing intent floating in a secret place. This was not the result of observation through spiritual sense. It was just a kind of feeling, or perhaps a kind of intuition. It belonged to the intuition of an experienced and profound cultivator towards danger. There was no evidence to prove this intuition, but he could feel that there was a powerful master hiding in the dark, not inferior to these two, waiting for an opportunity to make a move. Once he made a move, it would be a matter of life and death. The situation in front of them had already formed a triangular attack front, and Kai Nyonyo was at the core of the triangular siege. The first thing he had to deal with was Dong Wushang's one saber technique, 10,000 moves returned to one. At this moment, Kai Nyonyo's body suddenly retreated like a wisp of smoke. In an instant, he had already left Dong Wushang's attack range, drawing a straight white line in the air. This was a special phenomenon caused by the intense friction between his body and the air due to his excessively fast movement technique. He was actually facing Dong Wushong and Jiyu Duxing. He was retreating at an extremely fast speed. Along the way, it was as if a transparent hole extended far away. This collision had broken through at least dozens of walls of houses. This retreat had covered a distance of 3,000 feet. It wasn't until his eyes saw the round hole that the sharp whistling sound of air being torn apart suddenly rang in his ears. Then, the dust and smoke had time to rise. Following which, countless bodies flew out of the hole with a swish 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 sound. This was Kai Nyonyo, who had escaped. He had casually grabbed everyone he saw along his escape route and threw them behind him to block the pursuers. If one wanted to stop or even catch up with Kai Nyonyo at the first moment, this cave was undoubtedly the fastest and best way. However, as long as someone chased along this route, they would run into the innocent people Kai Nyonyo had thrown out. In such a high-speed collision, the weak bodies of these ordinary people would be shattered into countless pieces with just one touch. But if one had scruples about these people, one would never be able to catch up with Kai Nyonyo. Even if one did not care about these people, they would still be dead. Because when Kai Nyonyo threw these people out, there was still some residual force. If one could not resolve it in time, these people would still be dead. When the surrounding ordinary people saw this sudden turn of events, they were all dumbfounded and at a loss. No one would have thought that the doddering old man whom they wanted to protect with flushed faces just now was actually such a deranged demon. He grabbed innocent people and threw them into the sharp blade, using the disappearance of countless human lives as a bargaining chip to buy himself a little time to escape. There was a series of exclamations. Countless human bodies had already been thrown out, spinning. Dong Wushong, who was about to give chase, was so angry that he roared. But in the end, he could not do something like killing the innocent to chase after Kai Nyonyo. The helplessness at this moment almost made Dong Wushong explode with anger. A loud and clear sword whistling sound rang out. Jiyu Duxing had already taken the lead to give chase. Wait a moment. Before his voice had died away, Jiyu Duxing had already disappeared. Dong Wushong shouted loudly, and the dark saber returned to its scabbard in an instant. Then, he made a circle with his hands, and a gentle force was sent out to catch everyone who had been thrown out one by one. Fortunately, they managed to catch them in time, and no one was injured in the end. It was just that this street was suddenly full of people, all of whom were caught by Dong Wushong. There were men and women, old and young. There were actually hundreds of people in total. Some of them were not dressed properly. Obviously, who would be dressed so neatly in their own home? However, to be thrown out so abruptly was another matter altogether. All of them were terrified and scared out of their wits. They were clearly sleeping, drinking tea, chatting, taking a bath, or doing something else at home. How did they suddenly become flying people? And they came to the street in an instant. But there was a blur in front of their eyes. The burly man who caught them just now suddenly disappeared again. It was really as if they had seen a ghost. Then, they saw a group of people walking over with ashamed faces. Some of them sighed. Sigh, we've wronged a good person, we're really blind. Who knew that old fart was actually a demon? What a good actor, we've really let him down. Kai Nyonyo's escape strategy succeeded. Seeing that he had already escaped from the divine senses of Jiyu and Dong, he turned around and was about to flee. But suddenly, he felt an evil wind behind his head. Under the rebound of his palm, a short sword was turned into powder. But at the same time, more than 10 sharp sounds of the wind rang out at the same time. A cold voice said, "Do you really think you can escape?" That was a woman's voice. But the murderous intent in the voice was no less than that of the two men just now. It even surpassed them. Danger came again. Kai Nyonyo snorted coldly. His body spun like a whirlwind, and a purple light rose from his body. The surroundings were filled with clanking sounds. More than 10 kinds of hidden weapons, at the moment when they touched his body, had already been shattered by the protective primordial energy. At the same time when Kai Nyonyo broke the net of hidden weapons, a slender figure had quietly appeared. A short sword that really carried the arrival of death had also pierced Kai Nyonyo's chest like a meteor. All kinds of attacks and all kinds of unexpected attacks had already made Kai Nyonya unable to make any dodging action. Seeing this fatal sword, he could no longer avoid it no matter what. But at this moment, Kai Nyonya took a deep breath. His already thin chest collapsed in the air. The original landing point of the sword had a slight deviation because of this, and there was a brief pause at the same time. But in this little gap, Kai Nyonyo's 2 fingers had already pinched the tip of the sword, preventing it from continuing to fall. Until this time, he had the leisure to raise his head and look at the enemy who suddenly appeared. Unconsciously, a trace of strong fear flashed across his eyes. Killer. She was definitely a top killer who could be ranked in the top 3 in the entire Heaven Imperial Court. This woman's assassination skills had already reached the point where she could perfectly conceal her killing intent. Even if she killed the target, she would not reveal her killing intent. This was a perfect combination of cultivation and experience. In the entire Heaven Imperial Court, the number of killers who could reach this point would definitely not exceed the number of fingers on one hand. But when Kai Nyonya raised his head, he only saw a slim figure that was getting further and further away. The next moment, she had already completely disappeared. He did not even see the other party's face. In his hand, he was clearly still holding the tip of the other party's sword. This was an extremely sharp sword, at least a heaven-grade weapon. But the other party did not have the slightest bit of reluctance. Once it was held by him, she immediately let go and quickly retreated. If the attack failed, she would flee far away. No matter what kind of weapon it was, once it was caught by the enemy, it would no longer belong to her completely. She had to let go. Only by ensuring her own safety and life could she carry out the next mission. So Mo Lei immediately retreated after her attack failed. Good killing technique. Who are you? Kai Nyonya praised. He was really curious about this woman who suddenly appeared. Mo Lei did not say a word, but the other sword tip had already pierced towards Kai Nyonya ruthlessly and accurately. At this moment, Kai Nyonyo's hair stood on end, as if he had already been targeted by an ancient giant beast. The continuous killing intent that lingered like a net let him know that under the guidance of this aura, it was undoubtedly a fool's dream to completely shake off the enemy without killing the other part. Duxing had arrived. In this short moment when Mo Lei blocked for a moment, Duxing arrived just in time. Once he arrived, he attacked. A sword pierced through the sky towards the peak. His condition was unprecedentedly low. The plot arrangement was very good, but he was just tired and did not feel like writing. Today, he wrote 1 chapter. Chapter 2373. Kai Nyonya sneered. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. At least you'll have a companion on the road to the netherworld, so that you won't be lonely. He turned back quickly. With a clang, the short sword in his hand had already become the hilt of the sword. It collided with Duxing's black dragon sword fiercely. In this head-on collision, Duxing did a somersault to dissipate the remaining momentum. He landed in front of Kai Nyonya and his aura locked onto the person in front of him again. The 2 swords that had clashed earlier were buzzing with noise. If Chu Yang was here, he would definitely hate himself for being a busybody. Why did he give Mo Lei such a full set of high-grade equipment? Including Brother Jie, Tan Tan, Zi Xieching and everyone else, no one's equipment was as luxurious and high-grade as Mo Lei's. Because not only was there a large number of her equipment, but every one of them was of the highest grade. Not to mention the short sword and other close-range weapons, even the quality of all the hidden weapons were of the highest grade. Such luxurious equipment was probably unprecedented in the entire history of the Heaven Imperial Court. Even if it wasn't the last, it was at least unprecedented. Otherwise, how could a short sword that could be abandoned casually collide with Duxing's black dragon sword head-on and not be destroyed? Although the quality of Duxing's life weapon, the black dragon sword, was far better than Mo Lei's short sword, it was impossible to break it in one collision. In such a first collision, the black dragon sword was not damaged at all, while the short sword only had a grain-sized gap. That was all. It didn't affect the following battle at all. Kai Nyonyo's white hair was bleak. He looked at Jiyu Duxing and sneered. You came quickly and died quickly. Since you're in a hurry to die, I'll definitely fulfill your wish. Jiyu Duxing definitely didn't have the habit of speaking first when facing an enemy. He snorted and the black dragon sword flew up again with a hum sound. It was mixed with a kind of determination to sweep the world. The long sword seemed to have become a rolling river. In the midst of such a vast and sharp surging sword momentum, Kai Nyonyo clearly felt a sense of loss. There was a sense of loneliness, as if there was only one person in the vast world who was dancing with a sword. This sword move, actually had its own emotions. A sword of spirituality. This sword move was none other than Jiyu Duxing's original sword move, life and death, victory and defeat, turning head into nothingness. The long sword transformed into a long river of time, descending mightily. An unprecedentedly solemn expression appeared on Kai Nyonyo's face. He immediately raised the dagger in his hand and countered every move. Jiyu Duxing's body was moving rapidly, turning into an illusory shadow. He appeared and disappeared in front of and behind Kai Nyonyo, as if he was real and illusory at the same time. Kai Nyonyo, on the other hand, stood like a mountain. The short sword in his hand flowed with vigorous sword chi, and he slashed out like a storm. He calmly faced the battle and did not panic at all. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had already exchanged no less than 200 moves. Jiyu Duxing's goal was not to kill the enemy, but only to delay Kai Nyonyo and wait for Dong Wushang to arrive. Together with Mo Lei-er, the three of them would have the confidence to defeat the enemy. Offense was the perfect defense. His sword momentum was like a violent storm, airtight. His attacks connected heaven and earth, endless. In the face of such an attack, trying to forcibly escape would only result in him stepping onto the road to the netherworld earlier. Kai Nyonyo snickered. You're just waiting for your companions to come and join forces to launch a pincer attack. Although such a strong attack is fierce, it won't last long. Aren't you afraid of dying of exhaustion before your companions arrive? Hee. Actually, there's no need to go through so much trouble. Since I haven't left until now, all the more your companions won't leave when they arrive. I won't let any of you off. However, Jiyu Duxing completely ignored Kai Nyonyo's words. He only sneered, and his sword danced even more urgently. Kai Nyonyo's mouth was full of sarcasm, but in fact, he was complaining continuously in his heart. He had really braced himself to say those words just now. However, the enemy in front of him was really not easy to deal with. Kai Nyonyo knew that he could withstand it and not fall into a disadvantageous position. In fact, if this continued for a long time, there was a possibility of a backlash. However, all of this was based on the premise that Jiyu Duxing would eventually be exhausted. Before that, wanting to escape without paying a price was undoubtedly a fool's dream and absolutely not realistic. The other party's dense murderous intent had long locked onto him. He believed that even if he walked to the ends of the earth, he wouldn't be able to shake off this murderous intent. Not to mention Jiyu Duxing, there was also that woman who had once again hidden in the dark after her attack failed. Her strength was strong and her assassination skills were brilliant. She was also a formidable opponent. If there was even the slightest bit of carelessness, there was the possibility of losing his life at any time. Under such circumstances, wanting to escape unscathed was simply nonsense. It was just that Jiyu Duxing was obviously waiting for Dong Wushang to come over and join forces to launch a pincer attack, but wasn't Kai Nyonyo also waiting for the appearance of a turning point? As long as that person from before came over, the gap in strength between the two parties would be even more obvious. However, two people's thoughts were ultimately not as simple as one person's. At that time, when the other party had just joined forces, there was bound to be a moment of relaxation. At that moment when the other party had just joined forces, there was bound to be a moment of relaxation. At that moment of disharmony, cutting off the lock and escaping would be the most suitable way for him to escape at the moment. Otherwise, even if he managed to escape today, he was afraid that he would face the endless pursuit of the other party. One must know that these few young people in front of him represented the official forces of the entire Moryun sky. No matter how confident Kai Nyonyo was, he also didn't dare to really face the pursuit of the entire Moryun sky head-on. Kai Nyonyo was really strenuous in a one-on-one battle with Jiyu Duxing. It wasn't that Jiyu Duxing had already occupied the absolute offensive and he had fallen into a disadvantage and was in a very difficult situation. It was because Jiyu Duxing's attacks were really too sharp. Almost every move had a common characteristic: if you die, I'll be injured. That was a kind of outlaw spirit through and through, leaving no room for leeway at all. Kai Nyonyo could be said to be extremely troubled by such a fighting style. This was like a righteous ruler suddenly encountering a group of unreasonable hooligans. No matter what he said, they would just beat him down with a stick without any explanation. There was no buffer at all. It was completely barbaric and unreasonable. Facing such an opponent, it was simply unrealistic to want to deal with it completely without getting injured. It was definitely not that his strength was inferior, but it was very aggrieved. The other party completely didn't follow the usual way of fighting with all his might. Yet, he was the kind of person who cherished his life very much. He had encountered a person who didn't care about his life at all, and it was even an expert. Even if his cultivation was higher than the other party, there was also nothing he could do about it. What else could he do but feel aggrieved? Therefore, under Jiyu Duxing's violent attacks, Kai Nyonyo could only blindly protect himself and wait for Jiyu Duxing to finish in one go. However, every time he faced Jiyu Duxing's bone-chilling gaze, he would feel uncomfortable all over. This kind of feeling to the extreme made Kai Nyonyo feel very indignant. Even when I faced Yuan Tianji back then, facing that kind of gaze that could overturn the world, I didn't feel so uncomfortable. How can such a nobody actually make me feel so uncomfortable? Therefore, Kai Nyonyo was really a little angry. His original intention of coming here was to wait for the arrival of another person, but he ended up being besieged by 3 top experts. It was just collecting the life force of some ants. Was there a need to risk your life like this with me? Originally, Kai Nyonyo still planned to wait for Jiyu Duxing's companions to arrive before looking for an opportunity to escape, but now he suddenly changed his mind. Since you want to die so much, risking your life with every move, then I'll fulfill your wish. I'll completely kill this coffin face here. Then I'll leave calmly. Although that woman is also very impressive, the killing move is only for a moment. She may not be able to react in time. At most, she can only make up for it later. Her strength is even weaker than this coffin face in front of me. Even if I'm injured by her, as long as it's not a vital point, the injury won't be very serious. She may even completely lose the ability to fight under my counterattack. In this way, even if the other person comes, it won't be of much use. My true cultivation is far above theirs. It's absolutely impossible for the two of them to keep me here. What made him change his mind was Jiyu Duxing's gaze. Coldness, disdain, contempt, and a kind of disregard. This gaze completely infuriated Kai Nyonyo. His looking down on me. He actually dares to look down on me? People of the martial world are like this. You can kill me, but you can't look down on me. If you kill me, I'll say, good martial arts. Your sword is so fast. But if you look down on me, I'll fight you to the death. Kai Nyonyo roared, and the short sword in his hand suddenly pierced straight out. This sword carried a biting cold aura. Didn't you want to fight to the death? Let's see if you can really fight to the death against me. Faced with Kai Nyonyo's sudden change, a hint of sincere mockery flashed across Jiyu Duxing's eyes. The tip of his sword followed the other party's sword and pierced out, but it deviated a little. Your sword is the goal of piercing my heart? Come on, I won't dodge, because my sword will pierce your throat at the same time you stab me. No retreat. Tit for tat. Kai Nyonyo snorted, immediately retracted his sword, and raised it rapidly again, blocking Jiyu Duxing's sword to the side. Then, he stabbed towards Jiyu Duxing's throat again. Jiyu Duxing's expression didn't change. His long sword turned in a circle and pierced towards Kai Nyonyo's throat like a meteor. If you stab my throat, I'll stab your throat too. If we die together. Kai Nyonyo's sword was like the wind. It had clearly already touched Jiyu Duxing's throat, and even cut a line of blood, but he had no choice but to retract his sword and retreat. Because Jiyu Duxing's expression didn't change, and the direction of his long sword didn't change, still piercing straight ahead. If you don't retract your sword, I won't retract my sword. Even if you retract your sword, I still won't retract my sword. Kai Nyonyo, who was in the situation, was furious. With a somersault, he flipped 100 to 80 feet away and shouted angrily, "Who exactly are you? Are you even a fucking human? A war? Is there anyone who fights like you?" When he said this, Kai Nyonyo truly felt wronged. After a busy day today, I've finally sent out the second batch of physical books that everyone bought, causing the update to be a little late. Sorry. Today, I've signed more than 500 books. It's fine if it's just signing, but I've written a message for each first episode. Dear, I've never written so many words since I stopped going to school. My wrists are sore. Cough, cough, I'll continue to write. At the same time, I'll roar. I don't have many physical books left for the first to fifth episodes. Brothers and sisters who want them, hurry up and follow me. After sending out the physical books sent by the publishing house this time, I'll have to wait for a long time for the next event. Chapter 2374. There had always been battles in the pugilistic world where people fought with their lives, but this had never been seen before. Such calmness, such indifference, such silence, such a method of mutual destruction. I'll die first. As long as you die, it doesn't matter even if I die first. This was no longer a fugitive in the ordinary sense. It was a standard death warrior. You're clearly so young and you don't want to live anymore. What do I have to fear at such an old age? Kai Nyonyo shouted angrily, but he was a little cowardly at heart. The other party didn't want to live anymore at such a young age. It was really very strange. But at such an old age, he still cherished this old life very much, very much. Jiyu Duxing's expression was unchanged. He only snorted coldly and still didn't say a word. But the black dragon sword in his hand rose and his attacks became fiercer and fiercer. Both sides exchanged blows and their attacks became more and more frenzied. The defense between them became less and less. Most of them used offense as defense. The situation fell into a stalemate again, but Kai Nyonyo became more and more anxious. The sword he used was Mo Lei-er's short sword. Although the quality was good, it had its own shortcomings, and that was that it was too short. That was originally a weapon tailor-made for Mo Lei-er and would only suit Mo Lei-er. How could it suit Kai Nyonyo? As the saying went, an inch shorter was an inch more dangerous. In a battle between experts, a difference of a few centimeters was already a huge difference. This specific difference was even more obvious in a battle with a top expert like Jiyu Duxing who had gone through thousands of battles. So in the face of Jiyu Duxing's desperate sword moves, he had no choice but to dodge. Because if he didn't dodge, the best result would be to perish together with the other party. It was even very likely that the other party would be seriously injured and he would die. This reality made Kai Nyonyo even more aggrieved. He had a lot of skills, but under such a roguish fighting style, he couldn't unleash any of them. In a general sense, this short sword was already of a special quality and had reached the heaven grade level. But it was ultimately only one of Mo Lei-er's many short swords. It wasn't the kind of divine weapon that Chu Yang had specially made. Its quality couldn't be compared to Jiyu Duxing's black dragon sword. It was more than one grade lower. When they first fought, it was only damaged and could still be used. But now, they had already fought many times and collided countless times. There were already innumerable cracks on the short sword. There were a few large flaws in it, and it looked like it would break after a few more collisions. However, Jiyu Duxing's black dragon sword was still unscathed, and its luster was as bright as before. Sure enough, after fighting for a short while, Kai Nyonyo's short sword broke into two with a clang. Kai Nyonyo saw that the situation was even more unfavorable. He made up his mind and threw out the broken sword in his hand. Taking advantage of the time when Jiyu Duxing dodged, he drew out his sword with a swoosh. At the same time, his body spun rapidly. He spun like a gust of wind to a distance of 70 to 80 feet away. At the same time, he shouted furiously, "Stop!" Jiyu Duxing looked up and finally understood why this guy didn't use his own sword. It turned out that Kai Nyonyo's sword was a strange sword that was thin, long, and narrow, like an elongated chopstick. Furthermore, it seemed to be a transparent jade sword. Holding it in his hand, if one did not look closely, one would not be able to see it at all. Furthermore, this was under the condition that the long sword was stationary. If it were to be waved at high speed in battle, it would be equivalent to being invisible. This kind of sword was formless and traceless. With Kai Nyonyo's skills, if he were to use this sword to assassinate the enemy, he would be able to kill the enemy without leaving a trace. However, this sword itself still had a huge disadvantage, and that was that it was not hard enough. At this moment, facing Jiyu Duxing, this daredevil, who just happened to be holding a divine weapon that could cut through iron like mud, Kai Nyonyo did not dare to show his sword at all. To be honest, when he first got Mo Leier's short sword, Kai Nyonyo was simply overjoyed. She could actually give up such a divine weapon so easily. What kind of weapon grandmaster was she? Could it be that such a heaven-level divine weapon was so common that it could be seen everywhere? Unfortunately, he was not happy for a moment. In the blink of an eye, that short sword was already destroyed. If he still did not show his sword, he would immediately be at a disadvantage. Kai Nyonyo had no choice but to show his sword. The moment this sword appeared, Mo Leier, who was hiding in the dark, was stunned. To say that the weapons and hidden weapons on Mo Leier were absolutely gorgeous, probably no one in the world could compare to them. However, all of Mo Leier's equipment had a weakness that could not be considered a weakness, and that was that the level was not high enough. In terms of ordinary standards, all of Mo Leier's equipment was at least at the heaven level. Any one of them was also something that ordinary cultivators could only dream of but could not get. However, compared with the exclusive equipment of Tribulation and his brothers, such as Jiyu Duxing's Black Dragon Sword and Dong Wushang's Black Saber, these equipment were far from being comparable. In fact, this was also reasonable. If any one of Mo Leier's equipment was of that level, Chu Yang knew that he could not afford it. That would be too extravagant. Besides, Mo Leier also had a very regretful thing. Why didn't she have an exclusive equipment of her own? And this sword in front of her, this was clearly a sword that was specially made for assassins. It was a divine weapon that was specially used for assassination and could only be used to its maximum effect. What was more coincidental was that Mo Leier seemed to have heard of this sword before, but she had not really seen it before. This sword was used by Leng Ning, the king of assassins in Heaven Imperial Court tens of thousands of years ago. Warm snow sword. No one knew whether Leng Ning was a man or a woman. No one knew what he looked like. No one knew his true identity and origin. No one knew whether he was dead or not. All these information were still absolute secrets. And he had used this warm snow sword to dominate the world and made all the martial artists in Heaven Imperial Court tremble in fear. He was recognized by all the experts in the world as the King of Assassins. That was a legend that could not be replicated. The warm snow sword was a mystical sword made from the stellar heart warm jade and the profound ice crystal core. Warm jade was completely transparent and could ensure that the blood flow was smooth at any time and place. Mysterious ice crystal core was also completely transparent and had added a lot of sharpness. In addition, there was a kind of coldness that could penetrate one's heart, allowing one to maintain absolute calmness at any time and place. Such cold and warm materials were originally polar opposites, and water and fire were incompatible materials. But they were made into a perfect sword by a peerless master at that time, a completely transparent sword. Transparent, almost invisible, allowing the blood flow to be smooth at any time and place, allowing one to remain calm at any time and place. These characteristics were undoubtedly the dream weapon that every assassin in the world dreamed of. Mo Lei recognized it the moment she saw it. Her heart thumped wildly. She would never have dreamed that the weapon of the king of assassins would actually appear here, right in front of her. Mo Lei immediately made up her mind. No matter what, she had to get this sword. For such a sword to fall into the hands of someone like Kai Nyonyo, it was definitely a waste of God's gift. Only when it fell into her hands would it be a perfect combination, appropriate and logical. In order not to let the treasure sword be covered in dust, Mo Lei actually made a very unprofessional move. Jiyu Duxing was about to attack. How could the opponent take out such a lousy sword? How could it be a match for his invincible Black Dragon sword? He would only gain the upper hand. Unexpectedly, he heard Mo Lei's telepathic message in his ear. Second brother Jiyu, I want this sword. Don't damage it for me. I really like this sword. Please don't, please don't, please don't. Jiyu Duxing was stunned. Even with Jiyu Duxing's temperament, he almost wanted to cry out in pain. Great aunt, you're really my great aunt. You usually don't mess around, but when you mess around, it's not normal at all. Now that we're at the brink of life and death, you actually made such an unreliable request. It's already close to impossible for me to defeat the other party now. It's not easy for the other party to come up with such a lousy sword, which is the key to making use of. But at this time, you actually added a restriction that I'm not allowed to damage the other party's weapon. Are you trying to buy my life? Do you think I'm Big Boss Chu Yang? Oh my god, the other party's weakness that could be exploited actually became his strongest and most indestructible strength just because of one sentence from your eldest miss. Are you trying to play me to death? At this moment, Kai Nyonyo, who was on the opposite side, had already stood still. He abruptly shouted, "Stop." Then, he looked at Jiyu Duxing angrily. Why aren't you saying anything? Are you mute? Do you think you can pretend to be a dead person just because you put on a poker face? When he said this, all sorts of feelings welled up in Kai Nyonyo's heart. This guy in front of him was really like a mute. He spoke so little that he was like a dead person. From the start of the battle until now, other than the occasional snort, he really didn't say a single word. It seemed like he didn't even say a word when he was injured. If this guy was an assassin like that female assassin earlier, then so be it. But he was clearly fighting with him head-on, fair and square. Even if you scold me occasionally, I'll know that the one fighting with me is a living person, and not a creature that only has more energy than a dead person. Damn it. There's actually such a thing. Such a freak is really rare in the world. Jiyu Duxing looked at him coldly, but his murderous aura was increasing more and more. But he still pursed his lips and didn't say a word. But he heard another majestic voice say solemnly, "A battle is a battle, why are you still saying so much? Don't tell me that you, Kai Nyonyo, have to start scolding your enemies every time you face them. Which master of yours taught you this way of fighting? No wonder you're still so useless even though you're about to enter the coffin. Your master is simply a hindrance to others and a laughingstock." Dong Wushang carried the heavy dark saber on his back and silently appeared behind Kai Nyonyo, completely blocking someone's path of retreat. Dong Wushang had always been a man of few words. Usually, when he didn't have to speak, he would definitely not speak. Even if he spoke, he would definitely not say anything unnecessary. It was only when he was with Jiyu Duxing that Dong Wushang was really helpless. Because no matter how unwilling he was to speak, he had to take on the role of the speaker. He basically didn't speak much, but Jiyu Duxing didn't speak at all except when he was with his brothers. There was still a difference between basically and basically. No, basically was the difference between heaven and earth. Chapter 2375. Therefore, as long as Dong Wushang was with Jiyu Duxing, even if he knew that he was clumsy, he would force himself to be eloquent. This made Mo Lei especially dissatisfied. This blockhead didn't even talk so much when he was with me. Dong Wushang's arrival, Jiyu Duxing's eyes lit up. At the same time, Kai Nyonyo's eyes also lit up. Both of them were thinking of the same thing, which was that he had come at last. No matter what the situation was before, there was finally a chance now. Dong Wushang's arrival made things take a turn for the better. Whether it was Jiyu Duxing or Kai Nyonyo, both of them felt the same way. Dong Wushang slowly removed the saber from his shoulder and said slowly, "Kai Nyonyo, in the battle just now, you ran faster than a rabbit and didn't have enough fun. Now that you're here, you can't possibly run away again, right? If you have the guts, fight to the death." Kai Nyonyo looked up to the sky and laughed. He said in a hoarse voice, "You can rest assured about this. If I can't kill you two detestable juniors, I definitely won't leave this place." Jiyu Duxing suddenly thought of something and actually made an exception to say a sentence with many words. "Old four, don't blame me for not reminding you. Your wife specifically wants the sword in this scum's hand. She especially told me not to damage it. 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000 times." Dong Wushang scratched his head when he heard this. There was a hint of bitterness on his face. He opened his mouth and said, "This seems to be a little difficult." Jiyu Duxing nodded, "It's more than just a little difficult. It's simply too difficult. However, it's rare for younger sister to open her mouth. Since younger sister has taken a fancy to this sword, then this sword is ours." He spoke with such certainty, as if the sword was right there, waiting for him to reach out and grab it. Dong Wushang agreed wholeheartedly. He said, "Of course. If my wife has taken a fancy to something, I will definitely get it." Kai Nyonyo, who heard this conversation, was so angry that his nose was almost crooked. "I'm standing right in front of you, and my sword is still in my hand. You two juniors are actually trying to divide the loot between yourselves. How did my sword end up in your hands already? You want to provoke me, pull a tooth out of a tiger's mouth, and snatch my sword. You've misunderstood. Wishful thinking and ignorant juniors." Kai Nyonyo was on the verge of going mad with rage. "Today is the day you die. Go on your way." Kai Nyonyo brandished the formless and shadowless long sword in his hand. In his fury, Kai Nyonyo suddenly split into tens of thousands of Kai Nyonyo and attacked at the same time. Obviously, Kai Nyonyo also knew the weakness of his sword. In the face of an opponent who was as majestic as a mountain and an opponent who fought without regard for his own life, the only effective way to deal with it was to use this kind of ethereal attack. One of the opponents was desperate, while the other was majestic. Their movements were definitely not as agile as his. On this point, Kai Nyonyo was still quite confident. As for what the two of them said just now, "My sister-in-law has taken a fancy to the other party's sword and don't damage it," Kai Nyonyo did not believe them at all. Were they trying to fool a child? How could such a low-level restriction be imposed in the middle of a fierce battle? Only a fool would believe them. Jiyu Duxing and Dong Wushang shouted at the same time, one in front and one behind. Then, the Black Dragon Sword and the Black Saber attacked at the same time. The Black Dragon Sword stirred up a raging tide in the sky, mixed with an invincible and fierce sword aura, and met the formless and shadowless sword mountain that Kai Nyonyo showed in the sky. Dong Wushang's black saber also turned into a black lightning in an instant, wreaking havoc in the sky with unparalleled dominance. The two of them, one in front and one behind, attacked from the front and back. They were both as fast as lightning, and their power was shocking. However, Kai Nyonyo's side was even more ethereal, like an immortal. It was hard to imagine that an old man who was past his prime, more than 1,000,000 years old, could use such a nimble movement technique. Facing the joint attack of Dong Wushang and Jiyu Duxing, he did not fall into a disadvantageous position at all. Moreover, his sword was formless and shadowless. Even if they wanted to collide with each other's weapons, it was almost impossible to do so. Even if it reached a point where he really could not avoid it, Kai Nyonyo would rather use a very straightforward palm to meet it than to use a weapon to meet it head-on. Whether it was the Black Dragon Sword or the Black Saber, they were both divine weapons that Chu Yang had meticulously forged for the two brothers. It was a piece of cake for them to cut through iron as if it was mud. However, when they met Kai Nyonyo's palm, they finally let out a crisp sound like that of metal clashing. And the result of the clash was that Kai Nyonyo's palm did not have the slightest bit of damage. That shriveled palm that was almost skin and bones actually met the divine weapons head-on without the slightest bit of damage. This reality shocked both Jiyu Duxing and Dong Wushang. They really did not expect that with their current cultivation and strength, and with such divine weapons in their hands, they would actually be unable to do anything to the enemy's palm. Jiyu Duxing finally knew that Kai Nyonyo did not use his full strength at all just now. Knowing that the person in front of them was not to be trifled with, the two of them could not help but become even more cautious. Little did they know that Kai Nyonyo was also secretly complaining in his heart at this moment. Although Kai Nyonyo was full of arrogance, in fact, he had already decided to leave as soon as possible and escape unscathed. When they exchanged blows just now, he seemed to have planned to make use of the moment when the other party had not completed the encirclement to escape. But he never expected that when these two people drew out their sabers and swords, the killing intent was actually twice as much as when Jiyu Duxing locked onto him alone, at least twice as much. In the general sense of a joint attack, this kind of situation should absolutely not have happened. At the very beginning of a joint attack, there would definitely be some incoordination between the two sides, and the fusion of chi would be unstable. But these two people did not have any problems with their cooperation at all. They actually merged perfectly, as if from a single person's killing intent to a joint attack of two people. This result was not simply a matter of 1 + 1 = 2, but it was equivalent to increasing the pressure that Kai Nyonyo was facing by 5 times. Kai Nyonyo's original wishful thinking had already been declared completely ruined before it could be implemented. Moreover, there was another thing that was even more unexpected that happened. He originally thought that although the other party's martial arts could be improved quickly at such a young age, their body movements might not really reach the level of a sage, at least not to his level. But after the real fight, he realized that these two people were like fish in the water and eagles in the sky. Their body movements were smooth and flexible, and they could actually keep up with his rhythm completely. Even if there was a slight gap, it was difficult to affect the key to victory or defeat. This situation made Kai Nyonyo complain incessantly in his heart. This should not be. Even if I made a mistake in my judgment because of the age factor, even if the body movements of the one who used a sword were more agile, this could still be considered pardonable, but the one who used a heavy saber was simply like a big stupid ox. How could he be as agile as a monkey? It was really inconceivable to the extreme. It was as if he had seen a ghost in broad daylight. Kai Nyonyo had no choice but to launch his ultimate martial art, 10,000 Withering Divine Technique. Once this martial art was launched, the whole body would be like the strongest star iron, and almost nothing could destroy it. This was the real reason why Kai Nyonyo could withstand the joint attack of Jiyu and Dong's saber and sword without any damage. But the greater the effect of the martial art, the greater the side effect. This 10,000 Withering Divine Technique also had a great side effect behind it. The 10,000 Withering Divine Technique was actually a special martial art that hurt oneself first before hurting the enemy. At the beginning of the martial art's operation, one's own vitality would be turned into a special power. Every time it was launched, one's body would age a little because of the consumption of vitality. Although one could use the relevant heavenly treasures and devour the vitality of others to make up for the vitality that was completely lost, the appearance of aging could not be changed. It could only be used to age more and more. This was the main reason why Kai Nyonyo looked so old even though his cultivation was high and he had reached the high-level sage realm. Therefore, ever since Kai Nyonyo mastered the 10,000 Withering Divine Technique, he rarely used this extremely evil martial art unless it was a moment of life and death. But now, he was forced to use it helplessly, amidst the clanging sounds that were as dense as 10,000 blacksmiths hammering at the same time. 3 figures jumped up and down and fought with all their might. Mo Lei, who was hiding in the dark, was dazzled. She couldn't find any chance to attack at all. Chu Yang's original calculation was not wrong at all. With the combined strength of Dong Wushang, Jiyu Duxing and Mo Lei, it was indeed not a problem to deal with Kai Nyonyo. At the very most, they could take down Kai Nyonyo at the cost of a light injury. But there was a prerequisite. Kai Nyonyo did not use the 10,000 withering divine technique. Once he used it, the outcome would be hard to predict. Now, the three of them were in a circle, moving at an amazing speed and constantly changing their positions. No one had the upper hand, and no one was at a disadvantage. They were actually evenly matched. The battle had already been going on for close to 10 minutes, but this stalemate was still ongoing. Jiyu Duxing's expression was grim. The black dragon's sword turned into a black cloud, and he continued to attack. He attacked and defended at the same time, neither too slow nor too slow, and his movements were awe-inspiring. Dong Wushang, on the other hand, gradually showed some impatience. When had Second Master Dong's battle ever been so dragged out? Suddenly, he let out a loud roar, and his entire body suddenly expanded to 2 times its original size. He was like a giant that could support the heavens and the earth. Then, he suddenly appeared in this world. The black saber in his hand was swung in a circle. With a loud roar, he slashed down brazenly. A dazzling saber aura that was hundreds of feet long burst out. Seeing this, Kai Nyonyo sneered. With a spin, he was already close to Dong Wushang's body. The warm snow sword in his hand stabbed out like a poisonous snake. He was not afraid of Dong Wushang's giant body. Instead, he was afraid that Dong Wushang would not use such a fighting method. Once such a technique was used, it would definitely not work. This was the so-called big but useless principle. So he wanted to take advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to directly take the risk and approach Dong Wushang's body, stabbing out with his sword. Chapter 2376. Dong Wushang let out a loud roar. Instead of retreating, he advanced. He suddenly took a step forward and leaned his body slightly to the side, but he used half of his chest to welcome the nearly invisible warm snow sword. In the next moment, although he couldn't see the actual blade of the sword, he could clearly feel a chill on his chest. The warm snow sword had already pierced into his chest with a whoosh, all the way to the hilt. Although Kai Nyonyo's move was a risky attack, he never dreamed that he could succeed so easily. It was really too unexpected. The other party was such an expert. How could there be a reason for him to smash his vital part into the other party's weapon? The process was really fast. He was only slightly stunned for a moment, and the sword in his hand had already pierced through Dong Wushang's chest. Then, Dong Wushang leaned his body to the side and pinned the warm snow sword in his body. He endured the intense pain and gripped the warm snow sword fiercely with his left hand. Kai Nyonyo roared and twisted the warm snow sword fiercely. Dong Wushang's internal organs were in inexplicable pain at the same time. His palm was also badly mutilated. However, his hand still didn't relax. He persisted in gripping the sword fiercely, and his right hand punched out like a thunderbolt. It hit Kai Nyonyo's chest fiercely. Bang! There was a muffled thunder-like sound. At the same time, Jiyu Duxing became one with his sword. The black dragon sword turned into a black lightning bolt and slashed at Kai Nyonyo's wrist with incomparable precision. Even though Kai Nyonyo's 10,000 withering divine technique was almost unbreakable, facing Jiyu Duxing's all-out attack, that wrist was also about to be broken in half. The 10,000 withering divine technique was broken. Kai Nyonyo screamed loudly. He raised his left leg and kicked Jiyu Duxing's chest fiercely, causing Jiyu Duxing to let out a miserable groan. The lower half of his body was kicked into the air, but he still mustered up his remaining strength and slammed his head fiercely onto Kai Nyonyo's forehead. Kai Nyonyo screamed again. Blood spurted out from their foreheads at the same time. Jiyu Duxing's chest was kicked 3 times consecutively in the blink of an eye. Their heads were bleeding at the same time, and they both felt their heads buzzing. The black dragon sword that Jiyu Duxing was holding was kicked away. And in this short period of time, Dong Wushang's right fist, which was as heavy as a mountain, had already hit Kai Nyonyo's chest 7 times in a row. At the same time, his left hand was still fiercely holding the warm snow sword and competing with Kai Nyonyo's strength. But his mouth, he swallowed a heavy pill without a trace. For someone as simple and honest as Dong Wushang to be able to come up with such a scheme, if Chu Yang were to see this scene, he would definitely widen his eyes immediately. It's unbelievable. Kai Nyonyo's SS and dies, Dong's. His entire body was like a kite with a broken string. He was sent flying by Dong Wushang's reckless attacks. He retreated a full 500 feet, and his entire body was still trembling incessantly. Half of his wrist had already been cut off by Jiyu Duxing's Black Dragon sword. Now that he was injured consecutively and facing two people at the same time, he didn't even have a chance to use his full strength. Dong Wushang actually broke his wrist together with his skin and bones. The warm snow sword was already stained with Dong Wushang's blood. It was no longer invisible and formless. Dong Wushang and Kai Nyonyo grabbed it in one of his hands. He laughed loudly. This sword belongs to my wife now. Silly. Mo Leiyer's eyes were filled with tears. She rushed out from the darkness like a wisp of smoke and attacked Kai Nyonyo, who was retreating and hadn't stabilized his center of gravity yet. In an instant, more than 10 short swords pierced into Kai Nyonyo's body like flying locusts. Thud 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 thud. It was as if they were stabbing into rotten dead wood. Every short sword could only go 3 inches into his flesh and couldn't go any deeper. Every short sword was a heaven-grade weapon that martial artists couldn't get their hands on, but they couldn't cause any more damage. The 10,000 withering divine technique had already been broken, but it still had such power. It was really impressive. But no matter how impressive the 10,000 withering divine technique was, the injuries Kai Nyonyo suffered this time were still worse than before. He staggered a few steps forward and roared at the sky. He shouted fiercely, "Even if you snatched my sword and seriously injured me, so what? Aren't you also seriously injured? I have the 10,000 withering divine technique to protect me. I'm invulnerable. This little injury is nothing. But you will die sooner or later. Even if you snatched my sword, what's the use?" He looked at Dong Wushang with a hideous smile. "Your internal organs are all shattered. Can you still live? Is it worth it to fight over a sword?" Ha ha ha. Dong Wushang's tall and sturdy body stood upright. There was a huge bloody hole in his chest. It was truly a ghastly sight. However, Dong Wushang himself looked at Kai Nyonyo with an indifferent expression. He said in a disdainful tone, "Are you stupid? If I didn't have a life-saving method, why would I fight with you so desperately? Using your life to exchange for a sword, how can you think of that?" Kai Nyonyo was stunned. He said subconsciously, "Life-saving method?" Behind him, Jiyu Duxing also got up with difficulty. He spat out another mouthful of blood. Then, he sneered and said, "Yes, if we didn't have life-saving methods, why would we fight with you so desperately? Old Demon Kai, you've been fooled. Get ready to die." Under Kai Nyonyo's incredulous gaze, the huge bloody hole in Dong Wushang's chest actually wriggled slowly and gradually shrank. His bloody palm was also recovering bit by bit at a speed visible to the naked eye. Jiyu Duxing walked step by step to the side behind Kai Nyonyo. Although he was staggering at the beginning, he became more and more energetic as he walked. When he stopped, he had already recovered to his peak state. Behind him, Mo Leiya stood with her sword held horizontally. The sharp tip of her sword was pointed at the back of Kai Nyonyo's neck. The three of them once again formed an encirclement, sealing off all of Kai Nyonyo's escape routes. Dong Wushang chuckled and shook his head. He tilted his neck and instantly, the sound of his joints cracking could be heard. He patted his wound with his hand and actually tore off the scar on it, revealing the skin that was already in good condition. He laughed and said, "Isn't it nice to see this?" Kai Nyonyo saw this and took 2 steps back, dumbfounded. He looked at his right hand that had been broken off. It was also using the remaining vitality to agitate it. One of his palms was about to regrow. This was the regenerative ability that was unique to Saint experts. They only needed to expend some vitality to regrow a broken limb. That was all. But he could clearly feel that the two of them had completed the healing without expending any extra vitality at all. After recovering from their injuries, they were even more energetic. Their cultivation had recovered to its most complete peak state. That was, the state where they were in good condition and full of energy, but he himself had an obvious phenomenon of losing vitality. His own cultivation had also decreased by another step. After all, how could there be no effect when recovering a broken limb, especially during a great battle after being seriously injured? But the other party clearly had no effect at all. This reality made Kai Nyonyo almost break down. While he couldn't understand the situation at all and even suspected that he was in a nightmare, Jiyu Duxing, Dong Wushang and Mo Leiya had already launched attacks at the same time. It was a fatal attack. The warm snow sword had already been thrown into the ring by Dong Wushang. Now, the dark saber once again turned into a shocking thunderbolt. The black dragon sword whistled like a real black dragon, swallowing everything in its way. Mo Leiya also took out her real-life weapon. A pitch-black short sword was already in her hands. The three of them attacked from three directions, completely trapping the already seriously injured Kai Nyonyo. There was no gap or blind spot as they bombarded him to their heart's content. Kai Nyonyo's heart was already at a disadvantage. And after his body had been ravaged repeatedly, the 10,000 withering divine technique had also been broken and could no longer be used. At this moment, facing the joint attacks of the three great experts, he could only parry and had no power to retaliate. Bullying the weak with numbers, what kind of man are you? If you have the guts, fight one-on-one with me. Kai Nyonyo shouted this sentence in a panic, making Mo Leiya almost burst out laughing. This old devil couldn't have been beaten silly, right? He could really think of it. At this point, he was still delusional enough to want to fight one-on-one. Did he think that the three of them were all idiots? But now, Kai Nyonyo was really a little scared. As the saying went, the longer one lived, the more one was afraid of death. This might not be the case for other saint experts, but it was the most appropriate metaphor for Kai Nyonyo. Because other people's vitality was basically obtained through their own hard work and cultivation. They had gone through countless life and death situations before they could reach the level of an expert. Generally, experts who had reached this level had already seen through life and death and were indifferent to life and death. But almost all of Kai Nyonyo's vitality was devoured. Reaping without sowing. As long as there were people in this world, as long as there was life, with Kai Nyonyo's extremely strange technique of devouring vitality, he would be able to live forever. Although his appearance would become older and weaker, but, as long as he could live, what did it matter even if he was a little older? Kai Nyonyo was truly scared. He was afraid of death, afraid of being destroyed. The more scared he was, the more disorderly his moves were, and the more disorderly they were, the more he couldn't withstand them. In just an instant, his body had already been slashed by Dong Wushang's dark saber thrice, leaving behind 3 bone-deep wounds. Jiyu Duxing's black dragon sword had also been repeatedly stabbed and pulled out from Kai Nyonyo's body. And a small half of the hidden weapons on Mo Leiya's body were already deeply embedded in Kai Nyonyo's body. This made this old demon look like a human-shaped hedgehog, still rampaging and struggling desperately. Finally, Kai Nyonyo let out a desperate roar. All of a sudden, his entire body began to spin like a whirlwind. A tornado suddenly appeared, connecting the earth and the sky. Kai Nyonyo's face was flushed red. That extremely thin body suddenly swelled up, and he instantly became like a human-shaped ball. Full of despair, he shouted, "Since you've forced me to this extent, then the 3 of you can accompany me on the road to hell. If I die, don't think that you'll have an easy time either." He was going to self-destruct. It was too difficult to write. I can only say that these few days, I wanted to apply for leave countless times. In the end, I forced myself to endure it. Once I applied for leave, it would be a vicious cycle. Chapter 2377. His actually going to self-destruct? Jiyu Duxing and the other 2 had this thought in their minds at the same time. The frequency of their attacks slowed down at the same time. Once an expert of Kai Nyonyo's level self-destructed, at least one of the three of them would be buried with him. They were quite confident about it. However, when the attacks of the three of them slowed down slightly, Kai Nyonyo's entire body suddenly turned into a streak of black smoke. He screamed miserably, "Today's enmity is absolutely irreconcilable. As long as I am still alive, it will be the time for revenge." His voice was already 1,000 feet away in an instant. Self-destruct? How could someone like Kai Nyonyo, who cherished his life so much, really self-destruct? This was just a means to escape. Shocked by such a change, the three people couldn't catch up for a while. They didn't expect a high-level saint expert to be so shameless that he even threw away the basic integrity of a martial artist. They couldn't catch up and could only watch Kai Nyonyo escape. The three of them felt a sense of dejection. All their efforts were in vain for the sake of a mountain. This old fart was too shameless. But at this moment, they were very surprised to hear Kai Nyonyo let out an extremely shocking scream. His body that had become thin suddenly turned back like a ball. Along the way, there was a rumbling sound. Because two people suddenly appeared in front of him in the direction of his escape. One of them was dressed in red. She had a heavenly fragrance and was devastatingly beautiful. She was as ethereal as a fairy. The other was dressed in black, cold and handsome, with a long sword shining. It was Chu Yang and Mo Qingwu who had arrived in time. Kai Nyonyo's escape route was coincidentally blocked by Chu Yang. What harm was there in slaughtering the whole world with a casual move? Kai Nyonyo was frightened out of his wits, and he turned back in a sorry state. The five experts surrounded Kai Nyonyo. This time, it was really impossible for him to escape. Dong Wushang and Jiyu Duxing both had unconcealable embarrassed expressions on their faces. Boss finally gave them an important task, but they couldn't complete it on their own. In the end, they still had to rely on Boss to clean up their mess. This result made the two of them feel very annoyed. They really didn't have any face. But they didn't know that with Kai Nyonyo's terrifying strength, if it were the other two with Jiyu Duxing and Dong Wushang's cultivation to deal with him, they might have already died in his hands. The fact that Dong Wushang and Jiyu Duxing could severely injure Kai Nyonyo was already a great achievement in itself. If this spread out, it was enough to make the two of them famous overnight. Well done. Chu Yang took a deep breath and said, "I'm the one who's ashamed. It's because I misjudged Kai Nyonyo previously. You two really can't be blamed for this matter." I'm already very surprised that you two can reach this stage. This was definitely not a consolation, but an out-and-out truth. After Chu Yang and Mo Qingwu joined forces to kill the Black Fog Perfected Lord, they met Mu Kanglan, who had rushed over after hearing the news. After all, the experts they were dealing with this round were too strong. Naturally, the movements of their enemies were not small. In terms of cultivation, Mu Kanglan was only slightly inferior to a 7-star guard. When he saw such a big commotion, he naturally came over. Hearing that Chu Yang and Mo Qingwu worked together to take down Supreme Black Fog, Mu Kanglan was genuinely surprised. Supreme Black Fog was famous for a time. Although Mu Kanglan didn't really face this person, he knew that this person's strength was above his own. But today, he fell in the hands of Chu Yang and his wife. How could he not sigh? Chu Yang revealed to Mu Kanglan about the million-year-old monster Kai Nyonyo. Mu Kanglan's expression changed greatly. He told Chu Yang about the legend of Kai Nyonyo and his possible real strength. Chu Yang was shocked and rushed over. He finally came in time. Speaking of which, Chu Yang was the one who arranged the attack this time. Chu Yang had always been cautious, so he sent out two people at once. In fact, he had also taken Mo Lei-er's strength into consideration. It was equivalent to sending out 3 strong forces to achieve the current result. If Mo Tianji had arranged it, he would only send one person. Or Dong Wushang or Jiyu Duxing. Then, facing such a terrifying Kai Nyonyo, it would be really bad. Of course, Mo Tianji had made such arrangements on the premise that he had already ascertained Kai Nyonyo's strength. Only then would he have made such arrangements. If Mo Tianji hadn't been so meticulous, and had made such preparations so that nothing could go wrong, How could he have made such a death-seeking arrangement on that day? Jiu Du Xing, Dong Wu Shong, and a few other brothers would have perished due to carelessness. At this moment, Chu Yang was even infinitely grateful for his previous decision. At this moment, the 5 of them faced Kai Nyonyo at the same time. Chu Yang's eyes became colder and colder. Finally, he waved his hand and said, "Kill him as soon as possible." With that, the 5 of them attacked together, using all their killer moves. Now, Kai Nyonyo was already at the end of his rope. Not to mention fighting back, he didn't even have the strength to parry. Facing the joint attack of the 5 experts, how could he escape? He could only wait for death. However, at this moment, another unforeseen event occurred. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew in the sky, and a black shadow appeared without warning. Its speed was extremely fast. Before anyone could see clearly what had happened, the black shadow had already grabbed Kai Nyonyo and soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, the 2 of them had already reached a height of 400 to 500 feet. Chu Yang shouted. The calamity sword left his hand and turned into a shocking cold light, chasing after them like a meteor. The moment it was about to catch up with Kai Nyonyo, the sky 1,000 feet above the ground suddenly filled with clouds and fog. Nothing could be seen below. Above the clouds, a black shadow grabbed Kai Nyonyo and soared into the sky at an extremely fast speed. The calamity sword chased after them like a bolt of lightning. Finally, with a poof, the calamity sword stabbed into Kai Nyonyo's thigh. Kai Nyonyo groaned miserably. His face suddenly became snow-white and withered. Although it was just a thigh and not a vital part, the result was still the same. Once the calamity sword was out of Chu Yang's control, its ability to devour everything increased instead of decreasing. Moreover, because there was no longer anyone to suppress it, its devouring instinct was instantly exerted to the extreme. It automatically devoured all the essence and vitality of Kai Nyonyo. Someone in the black shadow murmured softly, "It's actually a rare divine weapon that has never been seen before. These little ones are interesting." Such a precious sword with great spirituality was actually thrown away so casually. "It's really convenient for me." He reached out to grab the hilt of the calamity sword and pulled it out from Kai Nyonyo's body. In just a moment, at least 30% of Kai Nyonyo's huge vitality of a high-level saint had been sucked away. The face of the rescuer was hidden in the clouds. He carefully observed the sword. The joy in his eyes grew stronger and stronger. Finally, he praised, "With such a divine sword, what's there to worry about not being able to achieve great things?" As he spoke, he reached out a hand and placed it on the sword. He said softly, "When I erase the original consciousness of this sword, it will become mine." His spiritual power suddenly erupted. It gushed madly into the calamity sword like a spring. Unexpectedly, the calamity sword suddenly let out an extremely clear sword cry. The sword trembled violently. Then, the black shadow trembled all over. As if he had been electrocuted, he let go of the calamity sword. Although the specific expression on his face couldn't be seen, his eyes revealed a sincere fear. After the calamity sword left the person's control, it didn't fall down. It just lay in the void by itself. The sword flickered with a strange light. A black shadow slowly emerged from the calamity sword. The black shadow only peeked out half of its body. It seemed to be a mass of fog without substance. The fog distorted again, revealing a hazy human figure. It was still unclear what it was, but a pair of eyes were shining. It was full of disdain as it looked at the black shadow in front of it. A voice cursed, "Damn it, who touched me just now?" When the black shadow heard this, his body trembled. He could clearly feel the terrifying power hidden in the shadow in front of him that was enough to destroy the world. He couldn't help but feel his heart tighten. He smiled and said, "Sorry to disturb. It's my fault." As the saying went, one doesn't hit a smiling person. However, this law was obviously not applicable to the black shadow in front of him. He glared and said, "Since you know that you're in the wrong, why don't you hurry up and kneel down, kowtow, and apologize? Also, punish yourself. I'll cut off that hand for touching me. Damn it, do you have to do it yourself? Can't you see?" The black shadow said arrogantly, Do you have the qualifications to be taught a lesson by me? The black shadow showed a trace of anger on his face. He said lightly, Senior, you can't do everything. There's no need to go too far. It's a small world. The black shadow said insolently, It's a small world. Bah. I like to go too far. I like to bully people. So what if I'm bullying you? Bite me. Why don't you come and bite me? The black shadow took a deep breath and said, If that's the case, if you want to teach me a lesson, Senior, please do it yourself. He was ready to fight. The shadow laughed strangely. Although you don't know, you still have some guts. You dare to talk to me like this. Damn it. When I was in the 33 heavens, even that first young master, you didn't dare to talk to me like this. Who the hell do you think you are? You actually want me to hit you with my noble hand? You really think you're a big shot? At this moment, the calamity sword suddenly trembled. Chu Yang's order came from the other side. Obviously, he wanted the calamity sword to return quickly. The shadow hesitated for a moment. Then, he suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a black smoke. The black smoke was as fast as a sword and hit the black shadow's chest. Even with the black shadow's cultivation, he had no way to dodge. With a crack, the bones in his chest broke. Then, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Unexpectedly, he had been seriously injured by the impact of that breath. The black shadow widened his eyes and looked at the shadow in front of him in disbelief. His eyes were filled with extreme fear. Chapter 2378. There was actually such a person in the world. Such power. Such martial arts. Such strength. His cultivation was already the best in the heavenly imperial court, but the other party just casually exhaled a breath and he was severely injured. Looking at the other party's relaxed and happy look, it was obvious that he didn't use much strength. Who exactly was this illusory figure? Hee. The shadow laughed strangely. You're lucky. If it weren't for the fact that you still have some value, I would kill you with my fart today. Remember, behave yourself in the future. Don't make me unhappy. If there's a next time, I'll take off your head and stuff it into your dick. Do you believe me? After saying this, the shadow swayed and yawned sleepily. Damn it, I'm going back to sleep. Then, with a swoosh, the calamity sword disappeared instantly. The shadow looked at the void where the calamity sword was just now, his eyes full of shock and horror. Until now, he still hadn't recovered from his shock. So powerful. Such incredible cultivation. But it was also so unbelievably rude. This sword, what kind of monster was it? But no matter what kind of monster it was, the shadow secretly made up his mind. If he saw this sword again, he wouldn't take the initiative to provoke it no matter what. This time, he was really scared to death. There was actually such a strange supernatural thing in the world. The calamity sword had already returned to Chu Yang's calamity space. The reason why Chu Yang dared to release the flying sword to attack was because of this. As long as the calamity space summoned it, no matter where it was, the calamity sword would immediately return. This was another link between the calamity space and the calamity sword. In midair, the shadow grabbed Kai Nyonyo and flew up a few hundred feet. It was almost 1,000 feet above the ground in the clouds before it finally stopped. But there was still a lingering fear in its heart. It wasn't that the black shadow was a coward, but the shadow that came out of the calamity sword was too terrifying. What kind of technique was that? Whether it was the aura, the pressure, everything was too terrifying. Especially the sword formed from the breath, it was simply a divine skill. The shadow clearly had no intention of taking his life. If it had any malicious intent, it wouldn't have needed to do anything. It would have just used a bit more force when blowing on the sword. After recovering from the shock, he lowered his head to look at Nyonyo, only to find that the latter was already dead. He was clearly still breathing weakly just now. How did he die now? Bastard. The black shadow said angrily. This was because not only had Kai Nyonyo died, but he had also died without a soul. Could it be that he was scared to death by that shadow? That's very likely. Something that even I'm terrified of would scare Kai Nyonyo to death. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that he would only bring back a corpse after risking his life to save them. Moreover, he had even implicated himself and gotten himself seriously injured. But in fact, the Black Shadow's guess was really wrong about the shadow. The devouring power that the Calamity Sword exerted with all its might was no small matter. Its power was simply terrifying. Although it only devoured 30% of Kai Nyonyo's vitality, it was the purest 30% of his vitality. As for the other parts, it was not that the Calamity Sword couldn't devour them, but that they were too rough. If Kai Nyonyo was in his peak state, it wouldn't be a problem to absorb them all. But now, he had suffered many blows. His divine skill was broken, his body was riddled with holes, and he had to spend a lot of energy to recover his limbs. His vitality had already been reduced by more than 50%. Now that the most essential 30% had been devoured, it would be strange if he could still survive. However, the Black Shadow's judgment was not wrong. Even if Kai Nyonyo was barely alive, he would definitely be scared to death when the shadow appeared. Even the Black Shadow almost lost his soul because of the sudden appearance of the shadow. How could Kai Nyonyo be an exception? The Black Shadow let out a long sigh and threw Kai Nyonyo's body down from the clouds. Then, he floated away. His injuries had to be healed as soon as possible. Today's unexpected disaster really came too suddenly and was too heavy. Also, he had to make arrangements as soon as possible. The original 4 experts, Kai Nyonyo had unexpectedly been crippled. One less. There wasn't much time left. As for the Black Fog Lord, he was just a temporary fighter. If he died, then so be it. Below, Chu Yang had already sensed the situation of the Calamity Sword. He smiled slightly. Forget it, let's go back. Ji Duxing smiled bitterly. I didn't expect that Kai Nyonyo would still escape even with the 5 of us joining forces. Dong Wushang also felt very embarrassed. Our goal has been achieved. Even if he escaped, he definitely won't have the ability to cause trouble during Xie Danqiong's coronation ceremony. Chu Yang said very firmly, you can rest assured about this. Mo Qingwu giggled and said, no matter who he is, after being beaten up by you 2 battle maniacs for an entire afternoon, he definitely won't be able to get up within half a month. Only then did Ji Duxing and Dong Wushang feel a little better. Ji Duxing's face was still cold, but Dong Wushang had already laughed foolishly. He even reached out and touched his head. It was really like that. Mo Leia looked up at the sky and rolled her eyes. This guy, this stupid look is really likable. The 5 of them chatted and laughed. Just as they were about to go back, they suddenly heard the sound of wind in midair. The 5 of them were shocked at the same time. Could it be that another enemy is coming? Could it be that Black Shadow who came to the rescue just now? That person's strength was unfathomable and difficult to match. While they were shocked, they hurriedly looked up. They saw an extremely thin figure rushing down from the endless sky like a meteor. His target was exactly where they were now. Looking at such a speed, the person was obviously ready to risk his life. What a fugitive. Dong Wushang had already pulled out his dark saber again. But at this moment, Mo Leia said hesitantly, why does that look like Kai Nyonyo? Everyone was shocked. What? It's Kai Nyonyo? He still dares to come back. Is he really risking his life? In the blink of an eye, the figure in midair came crashing down at lightning speed. The 5 of them jumped back at the same time, dodging the impact and waiting for the attack. Boom! That thin figure fell to the ground without any hesitation. The next moment, just as the 5 of them were dumbfounded, that complete body was smashed into pieces with a crash. Only that head was fortunately preserved. It jumped up alone and was still spinning in the air. A huge pit was formed on the ground. Inside and outside the pit, flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Fuck! The corners of Chu Yang's mouth twitched. After creating such an earth-shattering commotion, this guy actually died just like that. Was he really risking his life? This is really... Dong Wushang smacked his lips, but felt that he really couldn't find any suitable adjectives. After a long silence, Chu Yang waved his sleeves and scattered all the pieces of Kai Nyonyo's body into the pit. Then, with another wave of his hand, he lifted the soil to cover it up. He said, no matter what his character is, He's still an expert of his generation after all. It's better to bury him in the ground for peace. Everyone was silent. They were all curious about one thing. Just now, above the cloud-filled sky, what exactly happened? Boss, look at this sword. Dong Wushang took out the warm snow sword that he had obtained with great difficulty and said with a silly smile, Lei has taken a fancy to this sword, and this sword is indeed suitable for her to use. But I keep feeling that this sword is a little too brittle and not very hard. Boss, do you have any way to modify it? What a good sword. Chu Yang took it. With just one look, he instantly praised it. When this sword was held in one's hand, one could see it clearly. But as long as there was a slight movement or a slight wave, it would immediately disappear without a trace. It actually made ingenious use of the effects of light and shadow from all directions and angles. It was really ingenious. It could be said that as long as there was light in this world, this sword could become invisible. If there was no light at all, then nothing could be seen. Of course, this sword could also become invisible. I have to take a good look. Chu Yang secretly summoned the Calamity Sword and entered this sword, carefully analyzing everything about this sword. After a while, an extremely surprised expression appeared on Chu Yang's face. Lei, you're really lucky. This sword is actually empty. What? Empty? While Jiyu Duxing and Dong Wushang were still surprised, Mo Lei had already reacted quickly. She couldn't help but ask excitedly, could it be that there's something else strange about this sword? If I'm not wrong, it should be the inheritance of that king of assassins. Chu Yang laughed loudly and directly put it into action. He waved his hand and revealed the Calamity Sword. With a clang, he slashed at the warm snow sword. With a crack, the warm snow sword was cut into two pieces. Mo Qingwu, Jiyu Duxing, and the others cried out in surprise. They couldn't understand why Chu Yang would destroy such a rare and precious sword if he held it in such high esteem. However, they saw Chu Yang pick up the front half of the sword. Then, he circulated his energy in his hand, and gently sucked it out. A roll of cloth with a strange texture fell out. It was cold to the touch. This is silk made from the silk of the 10,000-year snow silkworm. Just this roll of silk is already a treasure. Chu Yang held this piece of cloth and slowly unfolded it. He said, the words on this are all directly embroidered with the silk of the heavenly silkworm. Even after hundreds of thousands of years, it won't rot or decay. Everyone's eyes widened. Using such a rare treasure just to record some things. In that case, how precious and rare would the things recorded on it be? The cloth unfolded. At the very beginning, there were 10 large characters the size of peanuts. The reason why they were called large characters was to compare them. Because below it were all small characters, densely packed together. Feet stepping on thick earth, sword pointing to the heavens. Without shadow or form, heaven dominates. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.